Chapter 451. Putting aside the fact that he hated her, she was really cute. She had no offensive power, and her eyes were round and clean. She looked and looked. Then, for some reason, he picked up his phone and took a picture of her peaceful, sleeping face. Then he posted it on his WeChat Moments. He wouldn't let Bai Ziwen go back. If she went back, she would either be beaten or sold. No matter how ruthless he was, he couldn't sit by and watch her be humiliated to the point where she couldn't live. So, if he wanted to recognize her as a sister, he had to let his friends in the circle get to know her first. He chose the picture he had just taken of her and wrote, "My sister," but then he thought of some of the dirty deals in the circle and was afraid that others would misunderstand. So his face immediately darkened and he emphasized, "Biological sister." I just recognized her. He thought no one would see it. At this time, at 2 or 3 in the morning, they were either having fun or sleeping. But he didn't expect. The picture immediately had people like it and leave comments. He clicked on it and took a look. Hey, fuck, she's so cute. Why didn't my dad get me a biological sister outside? With this kind of sister, what's the point of having my dad cheat? Tomorrow, I'll encourage my dad to cheat. B replied to A. Your mom will break all 4 of your dad's legs. C. Welfare, late night welfare. I say, this face, this chest, these legs, I've never seen such a pure and lovely woman. I replied to C. I only saw the face. Where did the legs and breasts come from? C replied wretchedly. He with this kind of face, she must have those kind of legs and breasts. When Lu Zishi saw this kind of message, anger rose in his heart, and he took a picture of a pure sleeping face. This group of wretches even imagined the breasts and legs. He swiped his finger and blacklisted C, then all kinds of messages came out. Give me a dozen sisters like this. No, I'm going to ask my dad if he has an illegitimate daughter outside. There were also some shameless ones who directly called out to Lu Zishi. Brother-in-law, I'll come to propose marriage tomorrow. Do you like the land east of the city or my family's 12 private jets? I'll immediately bring them to your door as betrothal gifts. Lu Zishi immediately blacklisted them. This one was also blacklisted. That one was also blacklisted. A bunch of idiots whose brains were filled with yellow filth. They were all blacklisted. Finally, when his WeChat moments quietened down, he sneered, Do you really think that your father can give birth to such a cute little sister? Ugly people are more mischievous. Then, he looked at the photos he had taken. Wei Bai turned her face to the side and laid in his arms. Her white and delicate cheeks were tinged with light pink, and a few strands of black hair were scattered messily in front of his chest. Fair, delicate, beautiful, pure. Lu Zishi suddenly and silently deleted the photo. It was too beautiful to be posted on his WeChat moments. Among the people he added, there was no lack of rich second-generation, hedonistic sons and such, who would know that when they looked at the photos. What would that group of wretched people think? After deleting the photos, Lu Zishi belatedly realized what he had done. Not only did he admit that Wei Bai was his younger sister, but he also admitted that she was his younger sister. He even deleted the photos and forbade others from seeing them. He was bewitched. Lu Zishi's mood was a bit chaotic. Then, he lowered his head and saw that she was quietly and softly sleeping. Even the sound of breathing could barely be heard. He didn't know why, but his heart also quieted down. Lu Zishi silently stared at her sleeping face. As he stared, his eyelids grew heavy, and he actually fell asleep. Only then did the system yawn and give a reminder. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 35. Chapter 452. Lu Zishi vaguely woke up. Half asleep, he realized that there was something soft in his arms. He immediately woke up with a start and saw Wei Bai with her head tilted, curled up in his arms. His arm rested horizontally above her head. Her breath gently brushed against his bare chest, bringing a burst of itchiness. Lu Zishi's body stiffened for a while before he carefully moved. He pushed her out of his arms. Wei Bai very meekly turned over and continued to sleep. The quilt fell to her abdomen, and under her disheveled shirt, her fair skin was seductively exposed. Lu Zishi's breathing deepened, and he immediately got out of bed. He hurried to the bathroom. When he came out again, he saw Wei Wei by hugging the sheets, sitting alone on the bed, looking at him warily. Lu Zixi's footsteps paused. He tugged at the corners of his mouth, wanting to greet her naturally. But when he thought of his behavior last night, in addition to his previous disgust towards her, it was indeed a bit perverted. He could only expressionlessly say, "You'll live here from now on. I'll have someone clean up a room for you." With that, he turned around and left. Suddenly, she softly called out from behind him, "Big brother?" She probed with some uncertainty. Lu Zixi had already walked to the door. He stopped and was silent for a moment before faintly replying, "In." This "in" seemed to unlock the shackles of the old enmity between them. Lu Zixi felt a burst of relief. Suddenly, the sound of light footsteps came from behind him. A soft body hugged him from behind. She hugged his back and softly called out again, "Big brother." This big brother was filled with boundless joy. Her voice was cheerful. "Even if you only recognize me for a day, I'll be very happy." Lu Zixi's nose soured, and he let her hug him. After a long time, he said, "More than a day. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 40. System. This terrifying increase in favorability is abnormally fast." After brushing up a good wave of favorability, Wei Wei finally gave up tormenting Lu Zixi for the time being. She began to manage her own acting career. Green Tea Sisters commercial is still very popular. After all, Wei Wei was too good-looking. Every man had a cute little sister in their heart. Every girl had a little fresh dream in her heart. And Wei Wei undoubtedly met all of these criteria. The Green Tea Company had also called her, saying that many people had contacted her and wanted her to shoot commercials or act in shows. Even Wei Wei had rejected her, because she had her eyes on a recent blockbuster. It was Xiao Yi's new movie, Dream Like Flowers. The system said, "Take advantage of your sister's popularity and work hard to increase her favorability." "Why did you go and act?" Wei Wei said righteously, "Because this is the only way to openly seduce others." "What?" Wei Wei, you don't understand. Just the identity of a younger sister isn't enough to increase favorability. That's why we need to use external forces to stimulate Lu Zixi and increase his favorability. System. With such a wretched mentality and plan, can you not say it so openly? Lu Zixi looked at Xiao Yi somewhat impatiently. "It's time to get off work. If you have something to say it quickly." Xiao Yi's face was filled with pride. "I found the role of the younger sister in Dream Like Flowers." Lu Zixi absent-mindedly looked at the time. "Congratulations." He had been getting off work early these past few days. Every time he came home, he would see a pink figure quietly peeking at him. When she saw that he was back, she would run away like a frightened rabbit. This younger sister of his was a bit timid, but the housekeeper had told him that every time he got off work, she would silently wait for him at the door. Sometimes when he came back late, she would keep waiting and not eat. After that, he went back much earlier. Xiao Yi smiled and said, "She's called Wei Wei Bai. She's the Green Tea Sister who is very popular on the internet." Lu Zixi casually responded, then looked up and said coldly, "Who are you talking about?" Xiao Yi led Lu Zixi downstairs. "She's in the practice room downstairs, practicing with the actor who's playing her brother." Lu Zixi hurried to the practice room. He saw Wei Wei smiling innocently and sweetly. She reached out and hugged a man. She looked up and softly said, "Brother, brother." Lu Zixi only felt a surge of fire rising up in him. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 453. Wei Wei wore a small white dress with an off-the-shoulder neckline, revealing her beautiful collarbone. She was like a pixie, her clear eyes filled with only that strange man. Her face was full of joy and excitement. "Big brother, you just came to see me." The man was a little fresh meat. His handsome and fair face revealed a spring breeze-like smile. He reached out with both hands and lifted Wei Wei into a princess carry. "Didn't I just win the war and rush over to see you?" Wei Wei naturally reached out and hugged his neck. Her head nestled in his embrace, a trace of sadness overflowing from her eyes. "I don't want you to go to war. I only want Big Brother to be by my side, to love me, to protect me. The man immediately felt distressed. I also want to stay by your side for the rest of my life. But the country needs me. Wei Wei Bai's almond-shaped eyes held a smile. She suddenly leaned close to him. Her soft and delicate face carried pure admiration, causing him to momentarily forget his script and stare blankly. Big Brother, I also need you. The man felt a little breathless. So soft, so cute. He really wanted to take her home. One was pure and sweet, the other young and handsome. From a distance, their posture was intimate and well-matched. It was simply blinding to the eyes. Xiao, he was still talking nonstop. Look how well-matched. In this movie of mine, the brother and sister's relationship is a big highlight. They secretly love each other, but they can't be together because of the secular world. That kind of strong taboo feeling should be acted out by two pure people. The person playing the brother was the newly promoted, super popular little fresh meat in Qian, only 19 years old. He had a young and handsome face and was indeed very pure. She was only 18 years old, the best and cutest age. She was a perfect match for Qian. Standing outside the practice room, Lu Zixi's eyes were gloomy and indifferent. The corners of his mouth pulled into a fake smile. So, how do you plan to let this pair of pure brother and sister act out the taboo love? The words brother and sister were especially fiercely enunciated. It felt like he couldn't wait to chew them up and swallow them. Xiao, he was like a blind and deaf person. He didn't hear the twisted mockery in his tone at all. Let's have an accidental kissing scene, an uncontrollable passionate kiss, and finally, a bed scene. Think about it. The girl's back is exposed, and she's lying in her brother's arms. It's so exciting. Lu Zixi only felt that the fire had reached the top of his head and was about to burn the entire practice room to ashes. In the practice room, the brother and sister were still hugging each other and looking at each other sweetly. Damn it. Did he need to hug her for so long? The rehearsal should be over, right? Why are you still hugging me? And that in Qian, what's with that look in his eyes? He was just short of pouncing on his sister. In the future, if there were to be a kissing scene or a bed scene, it wouldn't become a reality, right? Lu Zixi was also someone who had acted before. There were plenty of instances in the entertainment industry where fake things became real. He finally couldn't stand it anymore. He immediately walked in and pulled Wei Wei Bai out of Qian's arms. Wei Wei Bai jumped in fright. When she looked up and saw that it was Lu Zixi, her eyes were full of smiles. Brother, her voice was sweet and seductive. It made Lu Zixi's heart tremble. And Qian also immediately called out, Brother. Lu Zixi's face darkened. Who are you calling brother? And Qian immediately said cutely, Whoever is Wei Wei's brother is my brother. Wei Wei Bai returned a smile. Ah, Qian, do you like a brother that much? And Qian raised a super handsome smile. I don't lack a brother, but I lack a sister. Lu light bulb, non-existent, Ziyin. Fast transmigration system. Adonis, come here. /download the full article. https://www.sasho.com download the full article. https://www.sasho.com download the full article. https://m/sasho.com// Chapter 454. They were already flirting with each other. Were they going to roll around together next? He suddenly smiled, but his voice was as cold as the Siberian wind, chilling people to the core. You don't have to come tomorrow. I think the role of the older brother in Dreamlike Blossoms doesn't suit you. And Qian stared blankly for a moment before realizing that the person in front of her was Lu Zixi. Although Lu Zixi had retired for a few years, who didn't know him? Not to mention, this movie was invested in by Tian Na Corporation, so he was indeed qualified to change roles. Xiao, he had already rushed over. Don't, big brother. I'm about to start shooting. Your last-minute change will kill me. Lu Zixi gloomily looked at him. If I say change, then change. Otherwise, I'll withdraw my investment. Xiao, he simply threw a tantrum. Big brother's role isn't settled. The movie can't be filmed. If you withdraw your investment, I'll hang myself in front of your office. Lu Zishi. Then don't film. He had invested several hundred million, and now he didn't film. If he had so much money, why didn't he burn it first? He could still use it after hanging himself. Suddenly, a small hand gently tugged at the corner of his clothes. Lu Zishi lowered his head, but all he saw was the top of Wei Wei Bai's head. She seemed a little nervous, her pink fingers clutching at the corner of his clothes. Big brother? This movie is very good. Can't we film it? Her voice was a little sad because her head was lowered, so he couldn't see her expression. She was so cautious. Even her sadness was restrained and restrained. Lu Zishi's cold expression couldn't help but soften. You like this movie? Wei Wei Bai immediately raised her head, her eyes shining. Her small face without makeup was full of expectation. She nodded, and her ponytail swayed. She looked exceptionally soft and cute. Lu Zishi's mouth and brain seemed to be out of sync. The rational side of his brain clearly told himself very calmly that it was just a lousy movie. If he withdrew his investment, then so be it. But his mouth said first, then let's continue filming. The light in Wei Wei Bai's eyes turned into a smile. The corners of her mouth slightly curved. Her delicate eyebrows moved with joy. Thank you, big brother. You're the best. Her voice was soft and sweet, causing his eardrums to tremble. Moreover, her smile was especially bright and infectious, causing him to reveal a trace of a smile. Xiao Yi very tactlessly ran over and said, then if we don't withdraw our investment, can we continue filming? The smile at the corner of Lu Zishi's mouth froze again. He raised his eyelids, and the coldness in his eyes was like a knife, stabbing at the little fresh meat next to him. And Xian was dumbfounded, as if he didn't know why he was being targeted. Lu Zishi thought about how she was going to film. She would have to kiss, hug, and have sex scenes with this pretty boy in front of her, and also have a crush on him. A sour feeling welled up in his heart. He sneered, he's just a good-for-nothing with no strength. Can he act well? Xiao Yi, of course, why not? He's the best newcomer this year. Have you seen the XX movie? Have you seen the XX series? He's definitely capable. A trace of worship appeared on Wei Wei Bai's face, and she secretly glanced at Xian. The coldness in Lu Zishi's eyes deepened. Oh, it's just a little best newcomer award, and he dares to call himself capable? And Xian, who didn't say anything, obediently stood to the side. One was a director, the other was a film emperor and a boss. He didn't dare to speak. Xiao Yi nodded repeatedly. Of course. Didn't you win the Best Newcomer award in your first year? Chapter 455. Wei Wei Bai's sparkling eyes looked at him again. Lu Zishi felt both physically and mentally happy. He humped faintly. It's just a newcomer award. I've won the Best Actor award 3 times. Yes, he won the newcomer award in the first year and the Best Actor award in the second year. Then he retired. He was simply a legend in the entertainment industry. Wei Wei Bai tilted her head, her face a little red. Suddenly, she said in a sweet voice, Brother, you're so amazing. This sentence was so sweet that it could shatter his reason a little. He suddenly said, it's just as so. Just like when you were rehearsing just now, that gigolo didn't act well enough. Whether it was his manners or his lines, they weren't good enough. Wei Wei Bai stared blankly at him with a soft and cute face. Worship and concentration. Lu Zishi felt that under this kind of gaze, he would even pluck the stars from the sky, not to mention acting as a commentator. He suddenly said, you say the lines, we'll rehearse. Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a moment, then said in a soft voice, Brother, you just came to see me. Lu Zishi's expression suddenly changed. The tranquility in his deep eyes suddenly shattered, and joy overflowed from his heart. The tips of his brows and the corners of his eyes were filled with the pure smile of seeing his beloved little sister. He suddenly bent down and neatly picked her up. Wei Wei Bai cried out in surprise. His lips moved to her ear, and he whispered, Hug my neck, just like you did in the rehearsal. Her ears were sensitive. His gentle breath brushed past, and her ears turned red. Lu Zishi's eyes darkened. She had already extended her lotus-like arms and gently placed them on his shoulders. He revealed a heroic smile and wantonly said, Didn't I just finish winning the battle? so I rushed over to see you. A young general, full of heroic spirit. At this moment, Lu Zixi's suit seemed to transform into the armor of an ancient general. His ability to immerse himself in the character and his charisma was astonishing. Wei Wei Bai also seemed to be in character. Her eyes held unsuppressible longing, sadness, and joy. All kinds of complicated emotions were entangled together. In the end, she buried her head in his chest and said in a muffled voice, "I don't want you to go to war. I only want Big Brother to be by my side, to love me, to protect me." This sentence did not seem to be an act, but it seemed like she was revealing her true feelings. She even repeated in a low voice, "I only want Big Brother by my side." He suddenly remembered that when she was being abused, there was a time when she had drawn a picture of an older brother to accompany her, as if that would be the only way to protect her. She was spared the horrible torture. Although he had lost his mother during his childhood, his entire family revolved around him. He lived a life of luxury and insufferably arrogance. She, on the other hand, had been abused. She didn't eat or drink and had to be hospitalized several times because of serious injuries. Lu Zixi suddenly felt that she had so easily recognized him as her brother. Was it because she was already in despair that any random person would save her? She would resign herself to her fate and follow him, calling him brother. Thinking of this, Lu Zixi couldn't help but hug her even more tightly. His eyes glared fiercely at the two men present. The innocent-looking Qian and Xiao, he felt a chill run down their backs. They felt like Lu Zixi was going to eat them. Then he walked out with Wei Wei Bai in his arms. Xiao Yi anxiously said, "Then the role of Big Brother." Lu Zixi's footsteps paused. He turned around with a smile that wasn't a smile. "I'll play it." How could he not see through Xiao Yi's provocation? Chapter 456. And Qian's appearance wasn't suitable for the role of a brother. Because he had to invest, he had read the script. And Qian's gigolo was more like the last emperor in the drama. If he guessed correctly, Xiao Yi had deliberately led him to watch this play. It was to make him have no choice but to go into battle himself, so that his sister wouldn't be kissed and have a bed seen by a strange, wretched man. He knew it was a trap. He looked down and saw her leaning on his chest. Her lips curved sweetly, as if she was very happy. The depression in his heart from being schemed against dissipated. Forget it, a trap is a trap. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 45. The cast of Dreamlike Blossoms announced that Qian would play the last emperor, Chu Xianping. Fans, looking forward to it, the best newcomer. He has looks, strength, and his own popularity. Wei Wei Bai played the great general's sister, Yin Chi. Fans, Green Tea sister? Although she looks good, is she good at acting? She can't be an idiot, right? Lu Zixi played the young general, Yin Yi. The fans were collectively silent for 3 seconds, then exploded. God, my husband is coming back. Someone stab me and let me know that this isn't a dream. Brother Lu, I love you, I love you. I've been a fan since you debuted. You're this era's superstar. You're our star. Because of the news of Lu Zixi's comeback. On the contrary, Bai Weiwei was suppressed and no one discussed it. Occasionally, a few small fans would weakly say a few words in the vast number of Lu Zixi fans' comments. I think the green tea sister is very cute. Wei Wei Bai saw this comment on her phone and silently liked it. Yes, she also felt that she was very cute. Wei Wei, put on your makeup. We're going to shoot the official photo. The makeup artist ran over. Wei Wei Bai smiled and nodded, then went to put on her makeup. Lu Zixi had something to do today and would be late. So Wei Wei Bai shot first. And Qian had already put on the emperor's clothes. It was a thick black, and he had a crown on his head. His face was a little pale, and his eyes were a little gloomy. It was in line with his status as the last emperor. Lu Zixi got out of the car and hurried over. Because he had taken over Yin Ye's role at the last minute, he could only deal with all the company's matters at once. Only then would he be able to join the crew. As soon as he stepped into the studio, he saw everyone huddled together. A trace of displeasure flashed through Lu Zixi's eyes. Why didn't this crew have any sense of professionalism? He pushed a few people aside and heard a song. Her voice was faintly discernible and sweet. It was so mysterious that it seeped into one's heart. Lu Zishi looked up and saw a petite figure. She was wearing a red tulle dress, a simple and unadorned cyan jade pendant, and thick black hair draped over her shoulders. She stretched out her bare feet, her toes sparkling like jade, and stepped on the big red drum. Her figure was as graceful as the clouds, and her face was as beautiful as a flower. Her soft and beautiful fingers held a bright red peach blossom as she softly sang an ancient tune. In accordance with the photographer's request, she gently revealed a smile that seemed to be joyful, but also had a hurt look in her eyes. It was so breathtaking that people couldn't breathe. The photographer in charge of the shoot smoothly and satisfactorily finished taking the official photo. He said to Wei Wei Bai, "You can end it now." "Very good." His words awakened the people at the scene. Just now, when Wei Wei Bai was dancing in that dress, that magic was simply impossible to break free from. Now they could finally breathe. Chapter 457. The grief in Wei Wei Bai's eyes disappeared at once. She put away the grief in her body and saw Lu Zishi from afar. She immediately showed a happy smile and jumped down from the drum. Then, barefoot, she dashed over. Lu Zishi only saw that her dress was like a cloud. In the blink of an eye, she threw herself into his arms. "Brother, you're here?" Lu Zishi was silent for a moment, then said in a low voice, "Amin, I'm here." His hand couldn't help but grip her arm even harder. Just now, when she was singing and dancing on the drum, it seemed like she would disappear at any moment. This made Lu Zishi feel faintly uneasy. He didn't know where this feeling came from, but it was sudden, as if she would leave at any moment. Wei Wei Bai smiled sweetly and happily. "Brother, it's your turn to take the picture." It was as if she couldn't see the deep emotions in his eyes at all. A few strands of hair fell in front of his eyes. He blinked, suppressing the strange uneasiness in his heart. Then, with an indifferent expression, he nodded and went to change clothes. Lu Zishi's official photo shoot also went smoothly. When it was time to take a group photo, he wore a black robe and silver armor and held a bow and arrow. In the intersection of shadow and shadow, his handsome features were simply three-dimensional and perfect. The photographer felt that he was an actor in a movie. It really was a perfect picture. He really wanted to lick the camera lens. Wei Wei Bai was still wearing her red dress, standing under the peach blossom forest, while Lu Zishi galloped over on horseback. She raised her head and looked at him with a smile. Lu Zishi's expression should have been more resolute, but when he saw her smile, he couldn't help but smile as well. This scene was directly captured by the photographer. This group photo was even better than the original idea. So the official photo shoot was decided to use this one. After taking the photo, today's work was considered complete. When Lu Zishi finished changing and came out, he saw Wei Wei Bai wearing a white shirt and jeans. She was holding a thermal box and looking around on her tiptoes. His heart, which was cold and empty all year round, was suddenly stuffed with something soft and warm. When Wei Wei Bai saw Lu Zishi, she immediately ran over. "Big brother, you should eat something." "I just ate." There was rice, 2 dishes, and a soup in the insulated box. They were all warm. Lu Zishi wasn't picky about the simplicity of the meal. He directly picked up the disposable chopsticks and finished the food. He was surrounded by people all year round, but in the end, they were all separated by a layer. He had never experienced such intimate contact from his family. When he was almost done eating, he looked up and saw Wei Wei Bai sitting on a chair. The light shone on her face, and her fair and flawless face had a sweet and innocent look to it. She seemed to have noticed that he was looking at her. She couldn't help but reveal a sweet smile. Lu Zishi didn't know why, but his throat was a little tight. He pretended as if nothing had happened and drank the soup, but it didn't quench his thirst. After observing for a long time, the system finally couldn't help but say, "Host, stop flirting. This is your brother." Wei Wei Bai cupped her face. "Yes, brother, what's with this scary ending sound? And what's with this scary tone of voice?" The system advised earnestly, "I think it's okay to farm 100 affection points." "Wei Wei Bai, I'm farming affection, hee hee. What's with this scary old witch's laughter?" "Wei Wei Bai, Can't you see that I'm pure and innocent and don't understand anything? System. Chapter 458. No, it felt that its host was so black-hearted and rotten that no medicine could save her. The male lead should pray for his own good fortune. After Lu Zishi finished eating, he said to her, "Let's go back." Wei Wei Bai smiled and nodded. "And Big Brother?" The word Big Brother was sweet to the heart. Lu Zishi couldn't help but smile. He put aside his disgust for her and looked at her clearly. He realized that having a little sister wasn't bad. When they left the studio, the road was full of potholes and puddles. It had rained heavily in the afternoon, and they hadn't expected to accumulate so much sewage. Lu Zishi looked at Wei Wei Bai's little white shoes. She seemed to be in a dilemma as she stopped in her tracks. She hesitated for a few seconds before deciding to take a step forward. He suddenly walked in front of her and bent his knees. He turned back and said to her, "Come up, I'll carry you." Wei Wei Bai hesitated, somewhat at a loss. Lu Zishi said indifferently and forcefully, "Come up." Wei Wei Bai smiled somewhat bashfully. Then, she put her hand on his shoulder and pressed her body against his back. The road was very quiet. They had to walk through a long street before they could find a parking space. As she lay on his back, her slender fingers accidentally rubbed against his neck. His muscles tightened, but he didn't say anything and continued to walk. Wei Wei Bai indifferently leaned closer, her breath gently brushing against his ear. This was a sensitive spot. Lu Zishi's footsteps paused. An unbearable numbness appeared in waves from her careless breath. Lu Zishi's ears began to turn red. His jaw tightened, and his lips were tightly pursed. Wei Wei Bai seemed to be careless again. Her head softly rested on his shoulder, and her lips gently kissed the skin of his neck. A faint red color began to appear on his skin. There was a type of person whose body temperature could be seen. That was a man like Lu Zishi, whose skin would turn red when he was excited. Wei Wei Bai silently revealed a mischievous smile. She suddenly whispered, "Big Brother, I'm sleepy." Her voice was soft, clingy, and hoarse with a trace of exhaustion. She was pure and innocent, with a seductive charm that seduced people. Lu Zishi's breathing began to grow heavy. His face was red, and his black pupils were frighteningly bright. His breath undulated as he said, "Go to sleep. I'll wake you up when we arrive." Wei Wei Bai nodded sleepily and then closed her eyes quietly, her lips touching his neck. His long hair also fell on his shoulders and touched his cheeks. All of his senses were enveloped by her soft body and sweet fragrance. She did not resist at all. She seemed to completely believe that he was a good brother and would not do anything to her. Lu Zishi didn't even know how he walked through this long street. He felt as if his body was boiling. When he put her in the passenger seat, she was already fast asleep. Lu Zishi fastened her seatbelt. Just as he was about to start the car, he suddenly gasped for breath. His eyes were terrifyingly dark. In the depths of his eyes, there was a kind of dark and unknown heat that was rolling around. Finally, as if he had accepted his fate, he raised his head. He looked back at her and saw that she was leaning against the seat with her head tilted. Her face was fair and delicate, suffused with red. She looked exceptionally delicious. He stared unwaveringly at her pink lips. His fingers gently fell on her lips. His fingertips felt the softness of her lips. She seemed to be somewhat aware, and her lips trembled. He immediately didn't dare to move. Suddenly, her tongue stuck out and licked her lower lip. It also wet and hot licked his fingertips. Chapter 459. Lu Zishi retracted his hand, as if he had been electrocuted. He held his breath and didn't dare to move. But she didn't wake up and continued to sleep obediently. Lu Zishi was like a thief, wanting to steal but afraid of being discovered. His mind was a little blank. By the time he realized what he had done, it was already too late to stop himself. His lips gently fell on hers. Her light, soft, and adorable breath intertwined with his heavy, disorderly breathing. Lu Zishi's skin turned even redder. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 50. He kissed her for a few seconds, then immediately released her. Then, he drove home, not daring to look at her again. When he got home, He bent down and carried her out of the car. The housekeeper and the servant came up, intending to take Wei Wei by. Lu Zishi acted as if he couldn't see them. His face was as calm as water as he carried her to his room. Like a gust of wind, his footsteps were particularly hurried. After placing Wei Wei by on the bed and covering her with a quilt, Lu Zishi stared at his restless lower body with an ugly expression. The heat in his body couldn't be controlled at all. It was running wild. Wei Wei Bai suddenly groaned. She kicked the quilt away and rolled up her white short-sleeved shirt. Her pure white stomach was exposed. If he looked up, he could see her breasts. Lu Zishi's face darkened. He immediately turned and rushed to the bathroom. Hearing the bathroom door close, Wei Wei Bai lazily opened her eyes and yawned. Tongzi, I'm sleepy. System. If you're sleepy, then sleep. Wei Wei Bai planned to have a heart-to-heart talk before bed. Bored, she asked, Tongzi, do you know what Lu Zishi is doing? System. I don't know, I don't want to see. It's a pure system, different from those flirtatious cheap goods outside. Wei Wei Bai, Tongzi, sibling romance is actually quite hardcore. System. You just realized? Wei Wei Bai, but I like it. The system was silent for a long time, then suddenly said, a month has already passed. You only have 5 months left. Wei Wei Bai, question mark. The system replied, that's why you're dying. Wei Wei Bai, The system said, that's why you guys are destined to end up in tragedy. This ending will tell all the kids that according to my law, those who love each other will not end up well. Siblings will give birth to little retards, get struck by lightning, get hit by a car, drown in saliva. Wei Wei Bai. Suddenly, he didn't like sibling relationships at all. MDZZ system. Lu Zishi turned on the cold water and splashed his body. His scattered black hair stuck to his sinister face. He looked at himself in the mirror and frowned. His eyes were sharp and had a trace of dark madness. He spent more than an hour soaking in cold water in the bathroom. Finally, he cooled down the redness on his skin. He heaved a sigh of relief, reached for the towel, and wiped his body clean. While Lu Zishi was wiping himself with a towel, he suddenly couldn't take it anymore and fiercely combed his hair back. He said to himself coldly, you're crazy. What are you thinking? She's your sister. Even if he had just acknowledged her, even if their meeting was a mistake, how could he let this mistake spread? Did he think that she didn't live a miserable life? She was abused as a child and had a hard time as a teenager. Now that she was finally an adult, she couldn't possibly be remembered by her perverted brother. Let her life be dark and miserable? Yes, pervert. Lu Zishi looked at himself in the mirror and smiled sinisterly. To desire his sister. What was he if not a pervert? Download the mobile article at https://m/sashu. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 460. Lu Zishi walked out of the bathroom and saw her sleeping on her side. Her beautiful silhouette was faintly discernible under the light. He took a deep breath and then walked out. The housekeeper walked over. Young master, do you have any orders? Lu Zishi shook his head. I'll sleep in the guest room. The housekeeper hesitated and was about to say something. Lu Zishi took a step forward and went to sleep in the guest room. But 2 hours later, in the middle of the night, Lu Zishi returned to his room with 2 dark circles under his eyes and a cold expression on his face. He recognized the bed. The guest room's bed smelled wrong. The quilt was wrong, and the mattress was wrong. Most importantly, he was used to Wei Wei Bai's unique soft fragrance surrounding him. It was like being poisoned. Lu Zishi lay on the bed. She slept on her side and didn't lean over. He crossed his arms behind his head and looked sideways at her slender back. She was still too thin. Although she looked good on camera, she was light in his arms and didn't have the slightest weight. It was healthy to eat more. He looked, and his body began to heat up again. But he couldn't bear to move his body and go to the guest room. It was boiling here, and so was the guest room. But here, Lu Zishi took a deep breath. The bedding was filled with her faint, soft, sweet scent. And the guest room was empty and cold. It was the same insomnia, but he still chose to sleep here. Afraid that he would become a beast, Lu Zishi had to take out his phone to distract himself. He glanced at his friend's circle. There were still people leaving him messages asking to see his sister. He snorted and blacklisted them. In such a short time, he had blacklisted almost half of his friend's circle. Those who dared to covet his sister were all trash. He didn't make friends with trash. After blacklisting a few people, he logged out and went to Weibo. Even though it was late at night, Weibo was still in a frenzy. The first trending topic was the official release of Dreamlike Blossoms. It was unknown how many times more popular it was than the second post. The super director Xiao Yi, the genius film emperor who had made a comeback, and the super popular news star in Qian. They were all trending topic bombs. Under the official account of Dreamlike Blossoms, it was as lively as the new year. Lu Zishi was used to such things. He glanced at the comments on the official Weibo in boredom. At first, it was very normal. Most of them were happy that he was willing to come back and make a movie. But gradually, the comments started to feel weird. Don't you think Qian and Green Tea's sister are a perfect match? They are indeed a good match. I thought that Green Tea's sister didn't have any acting skills, but after looking at the official poster, I feel that she's really good. Lu Zishi scrolled up the page with a dark expression and saw that the latest official photo was of Qian and Weiwei Bai together. On the huge red drum, Weiwei Bai was wearing a red dress and white clothes. She was holding a peach blossom in her long and slender fingers. She looked at the emperor below the drum with a sweet smile. And Qian was dressed in a black robe, and her hair was combed into a bun. The pale and frail emperor lay beside the drum with deep emotions in her eyes. A huge impact of black, red, and white. It felt like an oil painting. Indeed, they were a match made in heaven. The temperature in Lu Zishi's eyes dropped, and he emitted traces of cold air. He put away his phone and felt the liver fire in his body become more and more exuberant. She suddenly turned over, and her long hair fell softly on his arm. Lu Zishi's body stiffened. He felt that she was already within reach. Her soft breaths brushed against his ear. He should push her away, but when his fingers were halfway, her slender and fair calf rested on his lap. The touch of her smooth skin simply made one's mind ripple. Lu Zishi didn't dare to move at all. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 461. No matter how lively the internet was, the filming started as scheduled. Lu Zishi and Weiwei Bai had a lot of scenes. The plot of Dreamlike Blossoms actually revolved around 3 people. General Yin Yi had thoughts of rebellion and pretended to be the naive and sweet Emperor Chu Xianping, letting Yin Qiqi enter the palace as a concubine. In reality, he just wanted to use Yin Qiqi as a chess piece to control Yin Yi. Yin Qiqi had a crush on her brother Yin Yi. Yin Yi also loved his sister in his heart. The 2 siblings having a crush on each other was a very tense main storyline in the movie. Emperor Chu Xianping was even more tragic. He had already successfully used Yin Qiqi to get rid of Yin Yi. In the end, he fell in love with Yin Qiqi and failed. From Weiwei Bai's point of view, this movie was simply a melodramatic Mary Sue drama. However, Xiaoyi had the ability to make this kind of melodramatic scene so moving and touching. Weiwei Bai was bored and chatted with the system. I think the increase in favorability is a bit abnormal. System, it's very normal. Are you doubting my professional statistical skills? Weiwei Bai, it's not a calculation problem. It's just that I didn't do much and the favorability just increased by itself. This kind of increase was very strange. Ever since she woke up with 55 favorability. Whenever she called her brother, her voice would be sweet. Ding, the favorability would increase by 1 point. Or she would pretend to hold his hand casually. Very good, another ding. She had obtained 1 point of favorability. In just a few days, from Weiwei Bai's point of view, the favorability had increased by 10 points for nothing. Now, the favorability was at 65. Weiwei Bai, who was born to work, felt that she had not done anything and the favorability had increased by itself. She was not used to it, the system said calmly. It's probably a syscon. Weiwei Bai then reacted. Syscon? Then she slowly revealed a mischievous smile. System. What's with this weird smile? Today's scene was about meeting Chu Xinping. Lu Zixi scenes were all tomorrow. Xiao Yi thought that Lu Zixi wouldn't come back, but in the end, he saw Uncle Lu wearing sunglasses and sitting in his director's seat. His entire person was indifferent and distant, but he was as handsome as a light bulb. No, he meant Uncle Lu was so handsome that he looked like he was glowing. No matter how handsome he was, he couldn't sit in his seat, right? Xiao Yi rushed over. Lu Zixi, this is my... Lu Zixi coldly raised his eyes. His sunglasses slid down the bridge of his nose, and a pair of fierce and gloomy eyes gloomily stared at him. He said in an unfriendly tone, Xiao Yi, hello, Mr. Film Emperor. Do you want a drink? Come, let me fan you. It's quite hot here. Lu Zixi snorted in satisfaction and lazily leaned back in the director's chair. The miserable Xiao Yi and Qian walked out in a black emperor's robe. She looked at the director's seat. Why was it Lu Zixi? Although he was neither too big nor too small, he was considered a popular celebrity. Furthermore, he was transforming into an idol powerhouse. But Lu Zixi's identity and status were there for all to see. He was a superstar in the entertainment industry. He didn't dare to provoke him. Wei Wei Bai also walked out. She wore a light cyan dress, and her hair was combed into twin buns and tied with a peach-pink ribbon. Her round almond eyes held a youthful innocence, like a flower bud that had just bloomed on a branch, pure and delicate. When Lu Zixi saw her, his gaze softened. He took off his sunglasses and gently said to Wei Wei Bai, Wei Wei, don't be nervous later. Just act casually, and then we'll go eat Japanese food. Chapter 462. Yes, he'd come today just to take her to eat, and to go shopping. He consulted his scoundrel friends, and they'd said that all girls liked this. Wei Wei Bai immediately smiled sweetly. Okay, big brother. Xiao Yi's face was full of shit. What the hell? What did she mean by casually acting? Hundreds of millions of investment was his great director Zhao's signature. Which actor would dare to casually act? He'd whip her to death. Lu Zixi seemed to sense something and looked at Xiao Yi. His gaze turned from soft to icy murderous in less than a second. Do you have any objections? Xiao Yi smiled flatteringly. No. How could I dare to have any objections? Then he turned his head and cried. Was there any justice? He was the director, okay? After the set was ready, they began to shoot the first encounter scene, and Qian quickly got into character. His posture was graceful, and because of the makeup, his face was weak and pale. And Qian's acting skills were still there. His every move was very elegant and noble as he stepped into the peach blossom forest. The scene was Wei Wei Bai falling from a tree into his arms. The tree wasn't tall. Wei Wei Bai sat on a branch and softly sang an ancient tune. She wore light peach embroidered shoes, which gently swayed as she stepped on the flowers. Lu Zixi looked at the camera lens and saw her sweet smile. It was like her nature was acting. She was usually so pure and innocent. Lu Zixi was a little worried about the tragic changes she would have to act out later. Suddenly, she fell from the tree. Without anyone's help, she fell. Lu Zixi suddenly stood up, his heart in his throat. And Qian looked up in surprise and immediately reached out to catch her. It was soft and fragrant, as if he was hugging a ball of glutinous rice cake. Wei Wei Bai took the opportunity to reach out and pull down his head. Then she raised her face, and the two of them formed an illusion of kissing. She'd studied this position. On the other side of the camera, the two of them were carelessly kissing. But in reality, the two of them hadn't touched each other. Lu Zixi's eyes abruptly sank, and he stared at them with a frighteningly dark gaze. His fingers gripped the armrest of the chair fiercely as his anger boiled up. They did not stop acting because of this accident, and Qian didn't realize that the two of them seemed to be kissing. Instead, he went along with the plot and teased, "Where did this little girl come from? She can't wait to fly into my arms." Wei Wei Bai also took the opportunity to move away, revealing her extremely bashful face. Her watery eyes glistened with curiosity. She looked at him with fear and shyness. "Put me down?" And Qian laughed out loud. No, you fell into my arms on your own accord, so you're mine. Wei Wei Bai was anxious. With a red face, she reached out her fist and lightly punched him. Who's you? You have such a big face. Put me down. Wait a minute. Was there such a bashful scene in the script? And Qian was also addicted to acting. He displayed the temperament of a profligate son to the extreme. He immediately reached out and lifted her chin. This world is Zhen's, and so are you. At these words, Wei Wei Bai's face appropriately paled. She pushed him away, turned around, and ran. But because her skirt was too long, she stepped on it and fell into Qian's arms. The two of them rolled into a ball, and Qian groaned. He knew that this accident would probably cut it. So, he didn't continue acting. Instead, he sincerely joked, "You're so heavy. Do you want to crush me to death so that you can inherit my position as a superstar?" Wei Wei Bai lay on his chest, lifted her slightly red face, and laughed happily. "Yeah, how did you know?" Chapter 463. The system couldn't help but remind the host, "Look at the male lead's face, it's dark." Wei Wei Bai. For a brother with a sister complex, his sister falling in love is the biggest blow. It's also the best way to force him to increase his favorability. System. Falling in love? Wei Wei Bai smiled, but didn't say anything. Then she smiled at Qian even more adorably. This pair was young, laughing and fooling around. They were simply invincible. Xiao, he couldn't help but say, "This pair really looks like a match made in heaven. It's good to be young. It's really pleasing to the eye." Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong. He looked up and saw Lu Zishi with drooping eyes and a dark face, coldly looking at the pair of young people flirting in front of him. Xiao, he was the only one in the crew who knew that Wei Wei Bai was his sister. He thought that Lu Zishi was worried that his sister would be taken advantage of. He immediately said earnestly, "I think Qian has a bright future ahead of him. It's not a bad idea to give your sister to him." Just as he finished speaking, Lu Zishi abruptly stood up. With a kick of his foot, he flipped the chair over. His eyes carried traces of viciousness, and everyone present felt a chill run down their backs. Lu Zishi's eyes were gloomy as he said coldly, "What are you making a fuss about? There are so many people in the crew waiting for you to mess around, right?" And Qian immediately stood up and reached out to hold Wei Wei Bai's hand. Lu Zishi's gaze was like a knife as he stared at his sister's hand. And Qian didn't know why, but his hand automatically retracted. It felt like Lu Zishi's gaze was about to eat him. Lu Zishi suddenly laughed coldly. "This plot needs to be changed. The meeting between Chu Xianping and Yin Qiqi is too undignified. It doesn't fit the style of the movie." Xiao Yi was. Lu Zishi, the person playing Chu Xianping, stand 3 meters away, and Qian didn't dare to resist. After all, Lu Zishi was the movie emperor and his boss. He couldn't afford to provoke him. He could only obediently stand 3 meters away. Wei Wei Bai was a little nervous and looked at Lu Zishi with some fear. Lu Zishi saw the fear in her eyes and clenched his fists. She was laughing and joking with Qian, that pretty boy. She was scared whenever she saw her brother. His voice turned cold. "You are standing under the peach blossoms." Wei Wei Bai took a few steps back, glanced at him timidly, and then turned to look at Qian. And Qian immediately gave her a reassuring smile. Who hadn't been reprimanded by the director before? She was still a newbie and needed encouragement. Wei Wei Bai immediately showed a friendly smile. Flirting with each other. This was practically digging Lu Zishi's heart. He held his breath and said, "Just act like this." How was he supposed to act like this? Flirting through air? Lu Zishi's voice was cold. "What? You can't act. I really don't know how you got into the cast." He lashed out at Qian. And Qian didn't say anything, but Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but purse her lips as her eyes reddened. Lu Zishi's bellyful of words died in his stomach, stifling his face even darker. He wanted to comfort her, but when he thought of how she had smiled so gently and adorably at Qian just now, he couldn't help but feel a little jealous. His heart was sour and bitter, and he couldn't even squeeze out a smile. Continue acting. It was a good plot of an emperor teasing a little white rabbit. It turned into an emperor looking deeply at the little white rabbit. Then the two people stared at each other without even a line. But Lu Zishi still found it dazzling. They were of the same age, and they were both handsome and beautiful. He watched from afar and also felt that they were a good match. The first day of the play ended in a muddle. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 464. Wei Wei by remove her makeup and change her clothes. Just as she came out, she saw the exhausted Qian also come out. The two of them empathized with each other and couldn't help but smile at each other. The young man and woman were fresh and beautiful. Lu Zishi looked up and saw their smiles. He lowered his eyelids, his eyes full of gloomy coldness. He was expressionless until Wei Wei Bai walked in front of him. "Brother." Lu Zishi looked at her deeply, then suddenly reached out and grabbed her arm. He pulled her forward and quickly dragged her to the garage. Wei Wei Bai stumbled after him. To keep up with his pace, she could only start running. She gasped and said, "Brother, slow down. I can't keep up." While her breath was unstable, her sweet and soft voice carried a husky charm. It was simply seductive. Lu Zishi's pace suddenly slowed, and his back was terrifyingly tense. After getting in the car, he calmly fastened her seat belt for her. The car sped out. The air was stagnant, and it felt like it was impossible to breathe. The system didn't dare to breathe loudly. "I feel like the male lead has been played to the point of breaking by you." The host kept rubbing against other men. She even deliberately faked kisses and deliberately smiled at other men. Was she trying to stir up trouble? Or something big? Wei Wei Bai stroked the system's well-behaved cat head. "Tongzi, you don't understand. It's impossible to get an affection value of 100. But to get an affection value of 100, you have to make Lu Zishi admit that even if I'm his sister, he'll still be moved like a beast and give up everything to only want me." System. Actually, you can pounce on him and take the initiative to climb into his bed or something. You can get 100 too. Wei Wei Bai. "Tongzi, you've fallen." The system slowly took out a piece of black chocolate and began to gnaw on it. "Yeah, I've been eating too many black things lately. My heart has turned black too." Wei Wei Bai. "If you pounce on him now, you'll still be dissatisfied. You can only force him to admit his feelings." Wei Wei Bai was already an old hand after scrolling through so many worlds. She was very familiar with the rules of emotional value. After returning home, Lu Zishi finally managed to suppress the anger in his heart. He didn't dare to look at Wei Wei Bai, worried that he would do something that he would regret. "You go rest first, I'll leave for a while." With that, he hurriedly walked away. Wei Wei Bai calmly went to take a bath. After she was done, she laid on the bed, smelling good. She put the script aside and started scrolling through her phone calmly. Lu Zishi smoked a few cigarettes outside. He had to calm down. Today, he had completely lost control. If he hadn't held it in, he would have died. When Wei Wei Bai kissed Qian, he had probably picked up a chair and smashed Qian to death. Violent madness surged within his body. Lu Zishi's hand trembled as he held the cigarette. He coldly said to himself, "She's your little sister. Don't let your delusions continue." It was a mistake at first. He couldn't be wrong all his life. He carried a lot of burdens on his shoulders. If he let his feelings go, he would definitely not be able to deal with them in the end. Most importantly, he would destroy her. When Lu Zishi returned to the room, he saw Wei Wei Bai lying on the bed. Under the light, she wore conservative pajamas. Only her white and tender neck was exposed. Her long black hair was scattered on the bed. She absent-mindedly rested her face in her hands and stared at the book with a smile. He didn't know what she was looking at. Lu Zishi couldn't move his feet. "This is your little sister, your little sister." It was like chanting the great compassion mantra. After repeating it hundreds of times, he finally calmed down. Chapter 465. Lu Zishi sneered. "What? You want to push me to another woman?" Wei Wei Bai is really grown up and knows how to find a woman for her brother. She didn't like him, so she pushed him to someone else. Wei Wei Bai panicked. Can I leave? Are you afraid that I'll steal your property?" "I shouldn't have come back. I shouldn't have come to take a share of your money." She was so pitiful, so helpless. It was as if she couldn't bear her brother's filthy desires for her. So she desperately tried to find a reason to deny that he had done such beastly things to her. Lu Zishi looked at her expressionlessly, with a trace of pity in his eyes. It seemed that all her struggles were in vain. I'll have someone make a fake paternity test and say that you're not my sister, Wei Wei Bai said in disbelief. What? Lu Zishi repeated softly. I've already announced it on my WeChat Moments and posted the fake paternity test results. You're not my sister. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. She was truly shocked. Were fake paternity tests as common as cabbages? Everyone had one. Her eyes reddened. I know, I'm not your sister. I'll move out immediately and stay far away from you. Lu Zishi looked at her indifferently. Wei Wei Bai was a bit embarrassed. If you didn't recognize me, you would have driven me away long ago, not using this method. Lu Zishi suddenly sneered. He carelessly reached out and probed under the quilt. His fingertips pressed on her skin little by little. It was ambiguous and carried a strong sense of possessiveness. Wei Wei Bai's face paled little by little. She didn't dare to move at all, as if recalling last night's events. Lu Zishi's other hand gently stroked her face. Be good, don't make me angry. When I have a family meeting, I'll take out the paternity test and let everyone know that you're not my sister. Then he smiled ambiguously. You'll know when the time comes. Wei Wei Bai, you'll be struck by lightning halfway through your sentence. Lu Zishi didn't make things difficult for her, as if he was afraid that she wouldn't be able to bear it and would collapse. After a few days of rest, Wei Wei Bai was finally able to return to the set, although Lu Zishi hadn't done anything civilized or harmonious to her. However, there was no lack of touching and hugging. Occasionally there would be wild kisses. What was strange was that even though he had kissed her enough, her favorability did not increase. Wei Wei Bai felt that the initial increase was too smooth. Once Lu Zishi felt that he had succeeded, the favorability wouldn't increase. What was the difference between eating a scumbag and not increasing his favorability? After filming the solo scenes, Xiao even specially looked for Wei Wei Bai for a chat. I watched the scene between you and Xian. You're a little reserved. You need to be more intimate. When Wei Wei Bai heard this, she glanced at the silent Lu Zishi in the director's chair with some fear. Lu Zishi wore sunglasses and looked at her from the side. His thin lips curved slightly, revealing a cold smile. Wei Wei Bai trembled and lowered her head, not daring to make a sound. Xiao Yi thought that he had scared her. Don't be afraid. It's normal for newcomers to be reserved. Lu Zishi's girl was soft and weak. Xiao Yi was afraid that he would scare her to death. After the chat, Wei Wei Bai suddenly received a text message. It was from Bai Ziwen. Wei Wei Bai rubbed her chin. Tongzi, I think that Lu Zishi can't be spoiled. He needs to feel a sense of crisis to increase his favorability. Lu Zishi, to put it bluntly, was a bit of a pervert. A relationship that was too smooth had instead caused him to be unperturbed. She had to stir up trouble to increase his favorability. The system advised, just struggle a bit, then casually say that you love him. That's all. Don't mess around. Wei Wei Bai, so casual. Okay, I'll struggle a bit. Because Lu Zishi had a scene, he wouldn't put on makeup. Wei Wei Bai counted the time. Then, just as he came out, she turned around and stealthily left. When she left, he happened to see her. Lu Zishi's footsteps paused, and he suddenly said, "Stop filming for now." Then he followed her. Meanwhile, Bai Ziwen anxiously paced back and forth in the public restroom. She didn't know why, but those lone sharks were always able to find her. Wei Wei Bai was her last bargaining chip. Suddenly, the restroom door opened. Wei Wei Bai stood in the doorway. Bai Ziwen was just about to say something when Wei Wei Bai's tears streamed down her face. "Mom, are you here to take me away?" Bai Ziwen, who wanted to borrow money, ? Lu Zishi, who had followed her, paused in his footsteps, his expression gloomy. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 466. Wei Wei Bai walked up to her and looked at her pitifully. Tears streamed down her face. "Mom, I was wrong. I don't want to acknowledge my brother anymore. Please take me away from here." The moment Bai Ziwen heard that, her face changed. No, if you don't acknowledge your brother, how are you going to live your life in the future? Look at you. You can immediately get Director Xiao to act after acknowledging him. Could you do that in the past? And most importantly, as long as she entered the Liu family, she would have money. She could only repay her debts with money. If she did not repay her debts, the loan sharks and casinos would drag her to sell her body. Other than asking for money, Bai Ziwen was also here to denounce her. She had yet to get her revenge for the beating that Wei Wei Bai had given her previously. But after being interrupted by Wei Wei Bai, she could not even remember that incident. Debt was the most important thing. Wei Wei Bai bit down on her lips with a pitiful look. But he said that he doesn't acknowledge me anymore. Bai Ziwen was furious. Why are you so useless? Do you know who your brother is? He's Liu Zishi, the CEO of Tian Na Corporation. As long as he gives you some benefits, you'll be rich for the rest of your life. Why can't you tell good from bad? If not for the fact that she had to rely on Wei Wei Bai to return to the family to repay her debts, Bai Ziwen even had the heart to beat her to death. Wei Wei Bai's face was pale as she looked at her in despair. That sorrowful look made Bai Ziwen feel a little uncomfortable. Why? I want you to acknowledge your brother, not sell your body. Wei Wei Bai let out a sorrowful expression. She wanted to say something, but nothing came out. She could only say helplessly, he doesn't acknowledge me. He doesn't acknowledge me as his sister. So, let's hurry and leave, Mummy. When Bai Ziwen heard that, her expression turned sinister. How can he not acknowledge you? You're a child of the Liu family. If he doesn't acknowledge you, it must be your fault. Wei Wei Bai opened her mouth a few times, but she did not dare to say anything. In the end, he could only say helplessly, Mom, can we not be rich? I'll work hard to earn money, and I'll support you. Bai Ziwen was impatient. She lit a cigarette and said fiercely, Raise me? How are you going to support me? I've asked you to sleep with the director a few times, but you only know how to run away. Now that you've become so bold, you don't want to acknowledge your brother, and even want to disobey your mother. I think you've eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts. Are you asking for a beating? Wei Wei Bai's pitiful appearance made her feel that she could control this good-for-nothing daughter. His confidence was greatly boosted. Wei Wei Bai was suddenly pushed to the limit and shouted angrily, You don't even know what disgusting things I've experienced. How can you force me like this? The cigarette in Bai Ziwen's hand trembled. She was also burning with anxiety. What kind of disgusting things could you have experienced? It can't be that Liu Zishi also forced you to sell yourself, right? I'll tell you the truth. I now owe 10 million in debt. If you don't recognize your brother, how will you repay the debt? Wei Wei Bai couldn't believe it. 10 million? Bai Ziwen sneered. If you don't have a way to get 10 million from Liu Zishi, I'll sell you. After a few more sales, I'm sure you'll have enough money. Wei Wei Bai was so delicate and beautiful. She was still a virgin. There was no need to worry about not being able to sell her for a good price. Wei Wei Bai knocked on the system expressionlessly. This is the first time I've seen such a shameless mother. I really want to beat her to death. System, I want to beat her to death too. This kind of mother shouldn't try to scam a stepmother. There are also good stepmothers, and there are also great mothers. Wei Wei Bai silently agreed. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com button at the bottom to record this reading record. Chapter 467. Liu Zishi stood outside the bathroom door. He leaned against the wall, a cigarette between his fingers. When he heard that she was leaving, she clearly knew that Bai Ziwen would beat her and sell her, but she would rather go with Bai Ziwen. Her heart turned cold. Did she hate him that much? So much, so that she would rather be with Bai Ziwen, the woman who abused her. She still wanted to run away from him? Liu Zishi's brows were grave and stern. The chill in his eyes could materialize. Bai Ziwen was still forcing her. If you don't have 10 million, you won't recognize your brother. Go sell yourself. When Liu Zishi heard these words, he felt distressed, but malice couldn't help but surge up. Wei Wei, look, this is your mother. Are you desperate for this world? He had wanted to take her away from the start so that she couldn't escape. But now, Bai Ziwen was forcing her even more unbearably. Then she would know that she couldn't go anywhere. Her brother was a bad person. Her mother was an even bigger bad person. This was the only way to shatter her hopes of escape. What a pitiful child. Bai Ziwen was still forcing her step by step, coldly saying a bunch of words about selling herself. Wei Wei Bai was daydreaming. Tongzi Lu Zishi is next to you, right? The system turned to look. Ah, he is? Wei Wei Bai. What is he doing? Seeing me so miserable. Is he very sympathetic? Once she sympathized with him, her favorability would increase. The system was silent for a long time before shattering her delusion. No, he's smiling quite happily. For the first time, Wei Wei Bai suspected ginseng. Her mother was a bad person, and her brother was a pervert. She was so miserable. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but cry. Tongzi, I feel like I'm the loneliest and most beautiful flower in this world. Why do they all have to force me to sob, sob, sob? System, blurg, Wei Wei Bai cried even more happily. It was better to be disgusted than to be disgusted by a crowd. Tiny, pitiful sniffles could be heard. Lu Zishi lowered his head. Under the shadows, his cold, hard face became even more sinister. The cigarette in his hand trembled, and the ashes fell to the ground. When Bai Ziwen saw Wei Wei Bai crying, she sneered, "Who do you think you are? If it wasn't for me, you would have starved to death. To tell you the truth, I came here today for money." Wei Wei Bai's face was full of tears. She looked at her blankly. "What if I don't go back and acknowledge my brother?" Bai Ziwen snorted coldly. "I'll sell you. Any old man will do as long as he pays 10 million. Wei Wei Bai's face was filled with grief, and her eyes became hollow. She sobbed and said to the system, "How can my mother do this to me?" System, you're too immersed in your role. You look so pitiful. It was just about to comfort him. Wei Wei Bai said, "I'm worth at least 100 billion. I'm so unique and beautiful. 10 million is too little." Scram. Bai Ziwen's phone suddenly rang. Her expression changed, but she had no choice but to answer it. They were debt collectors. I said, "I'll pay you back soon." Her tone became humble. Yes. Really. My daughter is a small celebrity. She's very pretty. She's just a green tea sister, you know? Oh, your boss likes green tea sisters. 5 million? That's too little. At least 8 million. Okay, 5 million it is. I'll take her there later, Bai Ziwen said with a smile. She hung up the phone. She had already changed her mind. For someone like Lu Zishi, if he said he wouldn't acknowledge his sister, he really would. If she wanted to get 10 million from Lu Zishi, it would be better to sell Wei Wei Bai. It was more practical. After hanging up the phone, Bai Ziwen immediately reached out and grabbed Wei Wei Bai. "Come with Mommy. Mommy will take you to a good place." Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here, /transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here, / transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Download Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here, Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here, comma. Chapter 468. Wei Wei Bai looked at her blankly, then suddenly reacted. "Are you going to sell me?" Bai Ziwen was too lazy to pretend to be kind. 5 million can help pay off half of Mom's debt. Otherwise, Mom will die. Do you want me to die? Wei Wei Bai, very willing. I'm overjoyed. I'm in high spirits. I clap my hands in joy. Bai Ziwen said, "I know that you still love your mother dearly. Listen to your mother and save her." Wei Wei Bai, no, I can't continue acting. I really want to hack her to death. I can't let this kind of person sully the title of Great Mother. She asked the system, "How about we hack her to death?" The system nodded in agreement. "I'll provide you with a kitchen knife for free." Wei Wei Bai was still thinking about how to hack Bai Ziwen to death without anyone noticing. Outside the door, Lu Zishi couldn't take it anymore. How could this slut ruin his sister like this? With a fierce flick of his hand, he threw out the cigarette and strode into the bathroom. Her back was thin and lonely. Her long hair hung down as she stood there foolishly. She didn't know how to run away even after being hurt. It was really distressing. Ding. The male lead's favorability has increased to 76. It increased by 1. Sympathy points. Wei Wei Bai. What's wrong with the favorability? It was clearly very easy to increase, so why isn't it increasing? She didn't have time to think about the reason. Suddenly, a hand appeared on her shoulder. It was a familiar aura, unique to Lu Zishi. His fingers carelessly smoothed out her long, disheveled hair. His other hand, however, was hugging her waist. His entire body pressed against her from behind, trapping her tightly in his embrace. Anyone who saw this posture would find it ambiguous. Wei Wei Bai didn't dare to move. She seemed to be scared stiff. Lu Zishi could even feel her body trembling. She seemed to want to escape, but she didn't have the strength to struggle. Cute and soft, but she didn't have the slightest strength to resist. When Bai Ziwen saw Lu Zishi appear, her crying face stiffened. She suddenly didn't dare to say anything. Lu Zishi's eyes were gloomy, but his voice contained traces of indifference. You only need to pay 10 million to buy her? Bai Ziwen laughed awkwardly. No, I was just joking. Lu Zishi's dark eyes made Bai Ziwen's hair stand on end. However, he suddenly laughed. It was so cold that it made people tremble. Why don't you sell it to me? How about 15 million at once? The 10 million renminbi gambling debt was repaid, and 5 million for living expenses. That was enough to last for a while. Bai Ziwen's eyes lit up, but she hesitated. Are you going to acknowledge Wei Wei? Lu Zishi didn't say anything. His attention was on Wei Wei Bai. Her warm and soft body trembled in his arms. He seemed to have been driven to the brink of collapse by them. Lu Zishi's eyes darkened, and he coldly lifted his eyelids. Are you selling? Bai Ziwen felt a chill run down her back. Dealing with people like Lu Zishi, she didn't even know when she would die. The fact that Wei Wei Bai was not her biological daughter. Sooner or later, she would find out. Before that, she would grab the money and immediately run away. When that time came, the person who would be found dead would be Wei Wei Bai. Bai Ziwen immediately said, "Okay, I'll sell it to you." As soon as these words came out, Wei Wei Bai couldn't stand still. Her whole body softened and she collapsed. Lu Zishi's fingers tightened, locking her completely in his arms. He calmly said, "Go out and find my assistant. He will give you the money." Bai Ziwen had a guilty conscience and immediately ran away. It was fine as long as she could get the money. She didn't care about Wei Wei Bai's life or death. Lu Zishi sneered. She took his money and still had delusions about living a good life? Slash. Chapter 469. Lu Zishi guided her bit by bit. You have no place to go, Wei Wei. I'm your brother. In this world, only I can protect you. A trace of struggle appeared in Wei Wei Bai's eyes. You shouldn't do such a thing to me. Lu Zishi asked faintly. Why can't I do it? Wei Wei Bai said in a panic. We're brother and sister. Lu Zishi suddenly laughed. Brother and sister? Who admitted it? Who knows you're my sister? Once he posted the fake report, it was all over. Who in his circle of friends would doubt it? Whether it was real or fake, he could settle it with a single sentence, couldn't he? Wei Wei Bai came back to her senses. The despair in her eyes was clear. Lu Zishi crushed her hope of escape bit by bit. I don't need a sister, Wei Wei. These words completely shattered the light in her eyes. He gently reached out and delicately stroked her tender face with his fingertips. Look, your mother doesn't need a daughter, and your brother doesn't need a sister. What else do you have? Wei Wei Bai looked at him blankly. His handsome face revealed a devilish smile. So, just be with me. We won't be brother and sister. Let's be lovers, okay? Wei Wei Bai's eyes were half closed. They were filled with confusion and confusion. Her moist, bright red lips suddenly opened and closed. Okay. Lu Zishi was still racking his brains on how to hypnotize her and make her agree to him. Lovers are much more reliable than brother and sister. We'll fall in love, get married, and be together for the rest of our lives. Okay. Lu Zishi finally reacted. He was stunned. What did you say? Wei Wei Bai looked up and pursed her slightly swollen lips. Her eyes flickered, and her tone was somewhat perfunctory as she repeated, Okay, let's be lovers. Immense ecstasy surrounded Lu Zishi without warning. He couldn't even react for a moment. He could only stare blankly at her. He could see that she was still unwilling. He could also see that she was retreating and running away. She might even be lying to him and thinking about how to escape. But at this moment, when she said yes, he truly felt a great sense of joy. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 80. Wei Wei Bai. Finally, Lu Zixi's fingers tightened as he held her chin. He couldn't help but want to kiss her. Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips and tried to avoid it. Lu Zixi paused and said helplessly, "I won't force you. Let's take it slow." Becoming a freak wasn't something that could be cultivated in a day. Lu Zixi also understood this principle. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said hesitantly, "Brother, we don't want—" Lu Zixi listened carefully. Only then did he hear her mutter softly, "Can we not do what we did last night?" Lu Zixi's face turned cold. Was she only agreeing because she wanted to avoid him? He smiled indifferently. "Okay, I won't do it for now." Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 75. 5 points down. Wei Wei Bai's mind exploded. What did I do wrong? I didn't do anything. I don't want to see civilized, dedicated, and fair bullet screen. Am I wrong? After this torment, Wei Wei Bai rested for 2 days before barely getting up. It was mainly because of Xiao Yi's phone bombardment that she had no choice but to get up. Because of Lu Zixi, the crew had repeatedly stopped filming, which had already made director Xiao explode. He roared, "If you don't come on set, I'll hang myself in front of Tian Na. I won't let you go even if I die." Lu Zixi, you're hanging? Wei Wei Bai, I'll go right away. These 2 days, Lu Zixi used his strength to explain what it meant to be a psychopath. The favorability went up and down. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here, /transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here, / transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Download transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here to read on mobile. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Chapter 470. She didn't do anything, but this guy's face was black one moment and smiling the next. His favorability would drop one moment and rise the next. Wei Wei Bai expressed that her heart was tired. She just wanted to be a little white flower that casually cried to gain favorability. Why was it so hard? So, she should be cold for a while and then increase his favorability. She couldn't afford to provoke her crazy brother. Wei Wei Bai was going to film, so of course Lu Zixi had to follow. The individual scenes for Dreamlike Blossoms were more or less done. Next was the scene of Shiraba. Oh no, the group scenes. This scene was when Chu Xianping, played by Yin Qian, discovered that Yin Qiqi and Yin Yi were having an affair. The so-called affair was Yin Qiqi soaking in a bath. Then she called her brother over, intending to devote herself to him. Could it be more melodramatic? If it weren't for the high-end atmosphere of this drama, she would have thought that she was filming an 18th-rate melodramatic drama. She was going to film a bath scene. Lu Zixi's face darkened, and he immediately ordered people to clear the scene. Xiao Yi sat in the assistant director's seat, feeling hopeless. Was he a director? No, he was a transparent background. After clearing the scene, Wei Wei Bai entered the bath in her swimsuit. As long as her shoulders were exposed, she would be completely naked. Xiao Yi said to Wei Wei Bai, "Wei Wei, you have to show obvious love later, understand?" He also knew that Wei Wei Bai wasn't Lu Zixi's biological sister. So, he wasn't as cautious as he was at the beginning. Wei Wei Bai nodded. It was too simple. Wasn't it just showing an affectionate expression? She had at least a dozen different affectionate expressions that she could use together, making her expressions richer and more interesting. Lu Zixi stood by the bath. He was also a film emperor. He got into character as soon as he said so. A trace of surprise appeared on his face, but more than that, he didn't approve. Wei Wei Bai soaked in the bath, her back facing Lu Zixi. Her long black hair was wet and draped over her shoulders. Her collarbone was slender and beautiful. She had only put on a light waterproof makeup, and her lips were slightly red. She turned her head with a slight frown on her face. Her lips were slightly red. She softly smiled. Her eyes were like falling stars, so beautiful that it shook one to the core. "Big brother." Her voice was sweet and tender, filled with deep sorrow. Lu Zixi's mind went blank. His heart was in chaos. His thoughts were also in a mess because of her. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 80. Wei Wei Bai expressed that she wasn't surprised at all. She even wanted to throw a system at Lu Zixi to crush him to death. Anyway, if the favorability increased, it would also decrease. Ha! Because it was an act, she went all out. She reached out and held onto the side of the bathtub. She reached out her soft and fair wrist and hugged his leg. Her pure and exquisite face carried a charm that could cause the downfall of a country. Am I beautiful? Lu Zixi's breathing stopped. She had always been afraid of him. This was the first time he saw this side of her. It was simply, he should hold her tightly in his hands and not let anyone look at her. Wei Wei Bai was addicted to acting. Her eyes reddened. Why won't you look at me? I like you. Lu Zixi then remembered his lines. He closed his eyes. Don't talk nonsense. He would take it seriously. Wei Wei Bai smiled. The tears in her eyes slid down her cheeks. She looked at him sorrowfully. I like you. I like you very much. I'm not a child. I know that my feelings for you aren't that of an older brother, but of a man. These words were filled with sincerity. There wasn't a trace of acting. It was more like an expression of her true feelings. Lu Zixi opened his eyes. A trace of confusion flashed through his dark pupils. He stared blankly into her eyes. Was her acting that good? Slash. Chapter 471. She didn't seem to expect him to open his eyes. There was no time to hide the complex feelings in her eyes. She suddenly released him and awkwardly bowed her head, her body trembling violently. Lu Zixi suddenly realized something and jumped into the bath. He reached out and grabbed her, pinching her chin. You like me? She shouldn't hate him. Should she avoid him like a snake or scorpion? Lu Zixi knew his own morbid thoughts, and he never expected her to accept it. But were the feelings she just revealed real? Wei Wei Bai's face was crooked from his pinch. She was just acting. She hadn't even used 30% of her strength. What was wrong with this big brother snake? She didn't protest. Xiao, he was already roaring. Fuck you, Mr. Movie Emperor. What are you doing? You're blowing up the scene. Are you sleepwalking? If you don't want to act, then scram. Lu Zixi saw the fear in her eyes again. His heart sank, and his eyes turned cold. He looked at the bristling Xiao Yi. What did you say? Xiao Yi's angry face stiffened. Roll, 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 Mr. Movie Emperor, you're awesome. Lu Zixi felt his heart full of hope turn to nothing. He stared at her, but there wasn't a trace of affection in her eyes. It was still the fear of cowering. Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips and hesitated. Brother, are we still filming? Lu Zixi suddenly became angry. Don't call me brother again. Wei Wei Bai's face paled, and she didn't dare to say another word. Lu Zixi's heart ached. He knew he had lost control. He released her and said in a gentle voice, Continue filming. They entered the zone and quickly finished filming the scene. The miserable one was Enxian. In this scene, Enxian was standing behind the beaded curtain, watching the siblings' affectionate confession in shock. In the end, the sibling passed without any NGs. He got dressed and faced the empty bath. The director let him act like this. And Qian was immediately dumbfounded. This was too much of a training for acting. Why didn't they wait for him to act? This was against the rules. After Wei Wei Bai was taken home by Lu Zixi, he disappeared again. Because there were still more than 3 months left, Wei Wei Bai was not in a hurry. When dealing with lunatics, one had to take their time. Otherwise, if one were to brush up on their favorability, who knew if it would return to 0 when they woke up? After taking a shower, she put on her teddy bear pajamas and was about to go to bed. Lu Zixi reeked of alcohol once again. Wei Wei Bai didn't have any makeup on, and her fair skin was so tender that people wanted to lick it. She was wearing cartoon pajamas and a hairband. She looked very young and childish. She seemed to be surprised by his sudden appearance. Her almond-shaped eyes widened slightly, and she was somewhat at a loss. Lu Zixi chuckled, indescribably self-deprecating. With a mocking smile on his face, he staggered forward and reached out to pull her into his arms. Soft and light. For Lu Zixi, it was very simple to hold her and not let her escape. Wei Wei, come with me to a place. After Lu Zishi finished speaking, he stuffed the stupefied Wei Wei Bai back into the car. Then, the car sped away. The speed was 200. And drunk driving. This made Wei Wei Bai not dare to make a sound. She was afraid that if she said one more word, she would get into an accident. Lu Zishi raced to the cemetery. When Wei Wei Bai saw the cemetery, her legs went soft. She was afraid that the ghosts in the graves would crawl out in the next second. Lu Zishi said, "Today is the anniversary of my mother's death." Wei Wei Bai, she suddenly remembered. Wasn't it because of Bai Ziwen that Lu Zishi's mother committed suicide by jumping off a building? To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 472. Lu Zishi dragged Wei Wei Bai to his mother's grave. On the tombstone, there was a picture of a beautiful woman in the middle. No matter how beautiful it was also very gloomy. Lu Zishi's voice was somewhat dazed. At that time, my mother's depression was already very serious. Bai Ziwen knew that she was in the final stages of depression, so she deliberately brought you here to provoke her. That was the first time he saw Wei Wei Bai. Too much time had passed, and only hatred kept him alive. The first time they met, he couldn't remember clearly. Wei Wei Bai Ziwen really wasn't kind. She was deliberately forcing Lu Zishi's mother to her death. Lu Zishi suddenly sneered at himself. "How much I hate you, Wei Wei Bai." At that time, he had just woken up in the hospital. Except for hating Bai Ziwen, it was Wei Wei Bai. If it weren't for her existence, his mother would have held on no matter how desperate she was. But she had an illegitimate child, a stain that could no longer be erased. It completely crushed that woman who pursued perfection in all things. Lu Zishi felt her hand gripping his fingers tightly, as if she was afraid. His heart immediately softened. Why was he scaring her? In the end, she was innocent, and because of his negligence, she had been abused as a child. She didn't have a single good day. Sometimes he wondered if he was crazy. How could he do such a thing to her? Her mother abused her, but he molested her. In this way, he was no different from Bai Ziwen. They were both scum. Wei Wei Bai finally couldn't help but knock on the system. Can I collapse my character setting? Forget about being a little white flower. I'll just throw myself at him and say I love you, brother. Otherwise, the favorability will keep going up and down. It's a waste of time. System. Where's your rich character setting? Wei Wei Bai, didn't you see Lu Zishi take me to the cemetery to reminisce about the past? If I continue to be rich, what if he gets hot-headed and wants to kill me for revenge? Psychopaths couldn't be guessed. And in the cemetery in the middle of the night, she had a psychological shadow. The system quietly nibbled on its chocolate. Yes. Good luck. Bai Weiwei got the system's encouragement fogged, and her confidence increased greatly. Just as she was about to pounce on him and say that she loved him too, Lu Zishi faintly sighed. Forget it. Let's go. Then, he carried the confused Wei Wei Bai back into the car. Wei Wei Bai helplessly rubbed her face. This Lu Zishi's mobility was too strong. He came and went without a transition. Lu Zishi started the car and drove out. Suddenly, he noticed that she had turned sideways and was looking out the window. The shadow of the lonely headlights was cast on the side of her face. Her long black hair was draped over her back, soft and smooth. Deep sadness appeared on her face, and her voice was somewhat suppressed. "I'm sorry. I didn't know that my mother had done such a thing." Lu Zishi fell silent. He could not bring himself to say that it was not his fault. She repeated softly, "I'm sorry. It's only right that you hate me." Lu Zishi's heart was both bitter and sweet. He did not hate her, but when he saw that she blamed herself for this matter and began to soften towards him, he couldn't help but secretly rejoice. Wei Wei Bai consciously laid the groundwork for a while. Now, she should be able to try to confess. After all, mutual liking was the easiest strategy. She relaxed her throat, and her face reddened for a moment. Then, her voice was soft and slightly hoarse. "Actually, I have someone I like." Chapter 473. Lu Zishi's fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly. "Do you have someone you like?" He looked at her and found that her face was tender and beautiful. Her eyes were clear and bright, and the corners of her mouth were curved in a smile. Yes, the first time I saw him, I knew I liked him. Lu Zishi felt as if he had fallen into an abyss. He forced a smile. Is that so? How much do you like him? Bai Weiwei's expression softened and became affectionate. It should be love at first sight. At that time, I thought if I could marry him, live an ordinary life with him, and live a quiet and happy life, that would be good. Lu Zishi's vision darkened. Is that so? Then why aren't you with him? Weiwei Bai was silent, her eyes filled with loneliness. I also want to be with him, but I'm afraid that I'll ruin him. At first, she didn't know it was her brother. Then it was her brother, so she could only desperately suppress her love. Her tone was light, but it hid a helpless sadness. Lu Zishi suddenly remembered that he had detained her, and the person she liked should be an ordinary person. Was she afraid that he would find out and take revenge? His chest felt like it was about to burst. He tried to suppress his crazy jealousy, but suddenly he heard her soft and gentle voice. But today, I finally understood that instead of letting us both struggle in pain, it's better to do everything we can to be together. Lu Zishi suddenly said coldly, Enough, I don't want to hear it. Weiwei Bai said sadly, Brother, the person I like is actually... Bang. Before she could finish her sentence, the car lost control and hit the guardrail on the side of the road. Weiwei Bai was almost sent flying. Lu Zishi also hit his head, and blood gushed out from his forehead. Weiwei Bai's pupil shrank. Hurry and hit the brakes, but it was too late. The car broke through the guardrail and rolled down. Below the guardrail was a slope. Fortunately, the slope wasn't long, and the car rolled a few times before landing. Weiwei Bai heard the system's voice. Minimum life guarantee activated. This function was only activated when life was in danger. She was dizzy, but she didn't feel any pain. Instead, she was filled with grief and indignation. Every time I'm brought to the cemetery to visit my mother, I get into a car accident. Do I have something against the cemetery? System. Maybe she has a grudge with someone else's mother. Weiwei Bai didn't care about anything else. She turned around and saw Lu Zishi collapsed in the driver's seat, his head covered in blood. She opened the broken car door and struggled to drag him out. Lu Zishi opened his eyes in confusion and stared blankly at Weiwei Bai. She was so slender and weak, but she used all her strength to drag him out of the car. Lu Zishi's lips moved. Wei, he had taken her in such a perverted manner and had even done such a thing to her. She couldn't be with the person she liked. She should hate him. How could she risk her life to save him? Weiwei Bai couldn't speak. Lu Zishi was too heavy. She couldn't even catch her breath. So how could she have the time to confess? With great difficulty, he managed to drag him to an open space. She was so tired that she was paralyzed. She sat next to him. Weiwei Bai gasped for breath. She suddenly remembered that she was still confessing. What a good opportunity this was. The beauty saved the bear. Confessing now would definitely have the best effect. Weiwei Bai pursed her lips. Tears fell, and she called out pitifully to Lu Zishi. Brother. Lu Zishi struggled to look at her, but saw that her bright and clear eyes were filled with worried tears. For the first time, he finally understood. She was different from them. She had never been polluted. She was pure and kind beyond compare. Even in the face of a pervert like him, she was still worried about him. Lu Zishi smiled bitterly. Weiwei, I'll let you go. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 85. Weiwei Bai opened her mouth to say, the person I like is... Lu Zishi's head tilted. He was completely dizzy. Weiwei Bai. Your sister, wake up. I haven't confessed yet. Comma. Chapter 474. Weiwei Bai and Lu Zishi both entered the hospital. Lu Zishi's head was broken. The blood looked frightening, but because his head was hard, he didn't even have a concussion. So he woke up very quickly. After Xiaoyi got the news, he hurried to the hospital. How did a car accident happen? Xiaoyi was carrying bags full of Lu Zishi's clothes, as well as Weiwei Bai's. Because she was hospitalized. Lu Zishi's housekeeper hadn't arrived yet, so he sped to the hospital first. The crew had also completely shut down. It was just a scene that Lu Zishi had invested in, so he could bear the losses no matter how long it was stopped. Lu Zishi's head was wrapped in bandages, and he turned his head with difficulty to look at the bed next to him. He had requested the double ward. Wei Wei Bai's injuries were actually more serious than his, but she was still able to drag him along and walk so far. She lay quietly, her face so pale that it was almost transparent. Just looking at her made one's heart ache. He said, "Be quiet. Don't disturb Wei Wei." Xiaoyi glanced at Wei Wei by lying in the bed next to his and finally couldn't help but ask, "What's going on?" "I've been holding it in for a long time." "What's your relationship with Wei Wei Bai?" The car was heading to the cemetery. He had known Lu Zishi for a long time, so of course he knew that today was the anniversary of Lu Zishi's mother's death. Lu Zishi and Wei Wei Bai had gotten into an accident in the same car at the same time. He had no choice but to ask. Lu Zishi was silent, and a trace of grief and struggle appeared in his eyes. Xiaoyi saw that something was wrong and asked with embarrassment, "What's wrong?" It was a simple question, but why did it feel like Lu Zishi was in so much pain that he wanted to die? Lu Zishi stared blankly for a moment before finally giving up and saying dejectedly, "She's my sister." "Xiaoyi, did you do it or did you do it by blood?" Lu Zishi whispered, "By blood. Her mother is Bai Ziwen." Xiaoyi thought of the Lu family's fucked up love and hate, and suddenly had the urge to curse. He couldn't help but ask, "Then what are your feelings for Wei Wei Bai? Do you plan to acknowledge her or take revenge?" Lu Zishi had been too erratic recently. He said that his biological sister was back, but in the end he said that it was a mistake. This made everyone dumbfounded. Lu Zishi pursed his lips and couldn't help but laugh at himself. How could I bear to retaliate against her? Xiaoyi finally realized that something was wrong. He looked at Uncle Lu, who looked like he was about to die, and then at Wei Wei Bai, who was lying on the hospital bed. His mind suddenly opened up as if it was struck by lightning. "Wait, you," Lu Zishi sighed. "Yes, I'm in love with her." Xiaoyi's mind went blank. Close relatives will give birth to mental retardation, and it's also illegal. Lu Zishi's expression darkened, and he gloomily looked at Xiaoyi. Xiaoyi really wanted to slap himself a few times. Of all things, why did he have to mention this? Lu Zishi smiled bitterly. "That's what she said too. But I know she doesn't like me, so she deliberately made me angry." Xiaoyi blurted out, "Who would like their own brother? It's not like they're perverts, don't you think?" Lu Zishi, "It feels like I've been stabbed by a knife." Uncle Lu's face darkened again. Xiaoyi immediately said, No, I think you're so handsome. Those who don't like you aren't women." Lu Zishi tried to suppress his anger, but then became sad again. "I thought that by locking her up, she would be moved by me sooner or later." Xiaoyi was shocked. "Fuck, you're illegally imprisoning her? You didn't do anything stupid like force yourself on her, did you? That's a crime that starts at 3 years in prison." Lu Zishi was silent. It felt like he'd been stabbed several times. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 475. Xiaoyi felt that he should seal his mouth, but Lu Zishi had done something worse than a beast. It was painful for him to hold it in. Xiaoyi looked sympathetically at Wei Wei Bai, who was lying on the hospital bed. He couldn't help it. You couldn't have hated her because you couldn't get her, so you pulled her into a car and died together, right? Lu Zishi was silent. In fact, it was because he heard that she had someone she liked that he was momentarily distracted by the pain and got into the car accident. But in that instant, did he really not have the thought of pulling her down with him? He couldn't help but move his chair a little farther away from him. He liked his own sister, imprisoned her, and forced her into a car accident. In the end, he couldn't get what he wanted, so he took her down with him. He was a complete pervert. Lu Zishi's mood was complicated, but in the end, it turned into a helpless sigh. When she wakes up this time, I will let her go. She had clearly suffered so much, but she was still so kind. He was a monster who had long sunk into the mud of darkness. What qualifications did he have to drag her down with him to hell? He coughed softly. "It's good that you've thought it through. Why don't you look at what you've done? This is your own sister. No matter how horny you are, you can't lay your hands on such a young child. Moreover, you imprisoned her, forced her to do that, and even wanted to drag her down with you. She must have had 8 lifetimes of bad luck to meet you. The more Xiao Yi spoke, the more his sense of justice exploded. Wei Wei Bai was too pitiful. How could she have met such a perverted brother who was worse than a beast? This kind of brother should be hung up and shot. Lu Zishi, I feel like I'm riddled with holes. So many knives are stabbing me into a sieve. Xiao Yi felt good for a moment, but when he was done, he discovered that Lu Zishi was eerily looking at him. The two were silent for a while. The air was so quiet. Wei Wei Bai suddenly groaned in pain, breaking the unspeakable silence. The two men suddenly looked up at her, but she didn't wake up and remained quietly unconscious. Lu Zishi's tired eyes revealed traces of sadness. He closed his eyes. You go. Xiao Yi's mouth. You're not thinking of doing something to your unconscious sister, are you? Lu Zishi almost vomited blood. He couldn't bear it. He picked up a pillow and threw it at Xiao Yi's face. Scram, or I'll withdraw your investment. Xiao Yi could only scram. After Xiao Yi left, only the two of them were left in the ward. Lu Zishi struggled to get up and moved to her bedside. Wei Wei Bai was wearing a hospital gown. There was not a trace of blood on her face. She was terrifyingly fragile. Her slender body looked even more frail and helpless now. He reached out and gathered her messy long hair into a bundle and placed it beside the pillow. Her black hair was a stark contrast to her pale face. She was obviously very haggard, but he actually thought that she was extremely cute. Fortunately, he's fine. Lu Zishi was truly afraid. He held her soft, seemingly boneless hand. With traces of fear in his eyes, he couldn't help but lower his head and kiss her fingers. She felt the familiar heat on her fingers. He couldn't help but tremble. Fortunately, you're fine. The doctor said that she was out of danger and would probably wake up tomorrow. The moment he heard that she was fine, he collapsed. This was the first time he truly experienced the feeling of liking someone, to the point that his emotions fluctuated with her. Only when Lu Zishi was facing death did he realize that loving someone wasn't the same as imprisoning them. Instead, he hoped that she could be happy. Wei Wei Bai slept for a long time. After she woke up, she groggily said to the system, "Is Lu Zishi awake yet? I'm in a hurry to confess." To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 476. System. You've been sleeping for 3 days. Wei Wei Bai. So. System. Lu Zishi left. Wei Wei Bai what? System. He suddenly realized that he was ashamed to face the pure and kind you. He was covered in filth and darkness, but you were as beautiful as an angel. He was afraid of tarnishing your purity, so he automatically left your side and let you spread your beautiful wings and fly into the sky. Wei Wei Bai had an expression that said, "What the hell are you talking about? Why don't I understand?" The system showed her Lu Zishi's movements for the past few days. After Lu Zishi left the hospital, he left the caregiver and the housekeeper to take care of her. Then he went to the company to deal with some matters and signed a share transfer agreement. He gave her 40% of his shares. He gave her a lifetime of glory and wealth. Then he went abroad. Wei Wei Bai? She said that she had only slept for 3 days and thought that 3 years had passed. Lu Zishi's actions were faster than a tornado. Wei Wei Bai struggled to get up. No, if he's gone for a few years, I'll die a horrible death. System. Your calf is broken and will probably take a month to recover. You can't go find him now. Wei Wei Bai. My leg is broken and I still tried my best to save him. He didn't even think that I love him. System. Wei Wei Bai struggled a few times before lying back down. System. Aren't you going to find him? Wei Wei Bai, my leg hurts. System. Don't you love him to the point that it hurts? Wei Wei Bai, I don't love him anymore. System. Wei Wei Bai had no choice. Her leg really hurt too much. Without the life support, she was in so much pain that she couldn't walk. Fortunately, there were still a few months. There was no rush. By the time Wei Wei Bai's calf was almost healed, almost a month had passed. Whether it was calling or inquiring, It was as if Lu Zishi had disappeared. Xiaoyi had come over a few times, and every time, he had a loving look on his face. There are only a few scenes left. You could just fill them up in the future. Rest well. If she asked about Lu Zishi's whereabouts, Xiaoyi's expression was one of pity, benevolence, and anger. Finally, he said earnestly, "Let the past be the past. You will be happy. It wasn't your fault. You have to work hard to get rid of the past and welcome a better tomorrow." Wei Wei Bai. No, she was just looking for an older brother. Why was the whole world against her? Wei Wei Bai. Tongzi, where's Lu Zishi? The system replied, "He's out of the country. It's too far, I can't see him." Wei Wei Bai sighed. "What's the use of raising you?" Wei Wei Bai. This can't go on. By the time Lu Zishi comes back, the grass on my grave will probably be as tall as his. As she spoke, she dragged a laptop over. After turning it on, she immediately started typing. The system looked over. It saw a conspicuous title appear in its host's hand. Green Tea Sister, it's more like Green Tea Bitch Sister. Bai Weiwei wrote a long article about the Green Tea Mimi's black material. I know some old news about that Green Tea Sister, who's been especially popular recently. This woman looks pure on the surface, but who knows how many beds she's slept with in private system. Host, what's wrong with you? Are you blackmailing yourself? Weiwei Bai continued to write familiarly. That's right, I want to blackmail until the whole internet knows. Didn't Lu Zishi leave the country? I want to blackmail, at least internationally, for him to see. Chapter 477. System. Why are you defaming yourself? Wei Wei Bai. Lu Zishi knows that I'm pure, cute, kind, and beautiful, right? System. Why aren't you blushing when you say that? Wei Wei Bai. So Lu Zishi can tell at a glance that these revelations are fake, and I've been defamed to the point of no return. Everyone spurns me, so I don't believe that he won't come back. After all, 85 favorability was already very high. Wei Wei Bai fabricated a lot of false information. What Green Tea Sister bought herself a hot search to hype her debut? Then she used all kinds of unspoken rules to get the role in Dreamlike Blossoms. Otherwise, how could a newcomer with no works get a role in a big production movie? She must have slept it out. Wei Wei Bai knew that the more malicious and extreme the comments were, the farther they could spread. And it would cause an internet crusade. There must be a group of strong attackers. Was there anything more offensive than Lu Zishi's fans? Wei Wei Bai scrolled through her phone. There were some photos of herself and Lu Zishi. Some of them were in the crew. After choosing for a long time, she deliberately cut the photos with Photoshop. Finally, she came up with a photo that she was satisfied with. It was a photo of her in a dance costume, a little revealing, with her hand on Lu Zishi's shoulder. This photo was taken by someone else. Lu Zishi's back was to the camera, so his face couldn't be seen. So this photo, with some exaggerated words, was evidence of Wei Wei Bai seducing Lu Zishi. Sure enough, when the photo came out, she wrote, "Green Tea Bitch Sister is still in the crew seducing the movie king." Although the movie king doesn't want her, it doesn't stop her from desperately sticking to him. Weibo completely exploded. Fans attacked Wei Wei Bai one after another. Like I said, what green tea bitch? She's just a green tea bitch. She's so ugly, yet she's still hyping up some fairy sister. Look at that chin, those eyes are so big. She must have opened the corners of her eyes. Disgusting, she actually dares to seduce our brother movie king. Get lost, get lost. She must have slept it out. Otherwise, how could a newcomer with no works appear in Dreamlike Blossoms crew? Wei Wei Bai erased all traces on the internet. No one would be able to find out who leaked the news. Then, he took a look at Weibo. Very good, it was the second most searched topic. The first was news from the production team of Flower Blossom. She took another look at the comments on Weibo. As she read, she fell silent. The system asked, "What is it?" Was it because the comments were too ugly, so he was upset? Wei Wei Bai rubbed her chin, feeling a little conflicted. So my chin is so perfect that it looks like it's been fixed. Wei Wei Bai. It even said that my eyes are so big that the corners of my eyes are wide open. Although I'm happy that my eyes are wide open, They're not as beautiful as me. Wei Wei Bai, my lips are fixed. I'm not that perfect. The system silently plugged in its earplugs. The host's narcissistic ways were really changing with each passing day. There were so many different ways, and they were super irritating to the eyes. Lu Zishi rubbed the bridge of his nose and tiredly got off the plane. Because of the transfer of assets to Wei Wei Bai, he urgently went abroad to deal with his grandfather. His grandfather was especially dissatisfied with his behavior. After all, he had a grudge against Bai Ziwen and her mother. His grandfather hated them to the bone. It wasn't easy to appease him, and now he was anxious to return home. Even if he had to leave her, he couldn't bear to be so far away from her. As soon as he got off the plane, he received a call from Xiaoyi. "Where did you go? Your sister is in trouble." Chapter 478. Lu Zishi's heart jumped, and his voice trembled. "What's wrong? Didn't they say that the car accident had no effect? Why did it suddenly turn bad?" "Xiaoyi, the whole internet is black. Your fans are too scary. I tried to clarify things for Wei Wei Bai, but I was still killed." Xiaoyi didn't dare to directly expose that Wei Wei Bai was Lu Zishi's sister. After all, the Lu family was a powerful family. If Lu Zishi didn't express his position, how could he dare to expose it? So he could only clarify that Wei Wei Bai wasn't involved in the unspoken rules. As a result, he was slandered by fans for sleeping with Wei Wei Bai. He was so scared that he peed his pants. If Lu Zishi came back and saw this black material, he would skin him alive. Lu Zishi frowned and went online. Seeing the extreme fan comments, his face immediately darkened. He gripped his phone. "Where's Wei Wei?" Internet words could kill. With so many nasty words, would she be frightened? Xiaoyi, she seemed to have seen the black material online and ran out of the hospital. "I don't know where she went." Lu Zishi's eyes turned malicious. "You actually let her go missing." Xiaoyi trembled with fear. "It was a moment of negligence," Lu Zishi said angrily. "Enough, hurry up and find her." He couldn't believe that Wei Wei Bai would be hurt so much after seeing the crazy comments online. Lu Zishi searched with all his might and soon found Wei Wei Bai. She was in a small rented apartment. She hadn't gone out for a few days. Lu Zishi hurried over. Wei Wei Bai was cutting cucumbers and putting them on her face. "System, the male lead is here. The door will open in 1 minute." Wei Wei Bai's hand trembled, and she hurriedly took the cucumber off her face and threw it in the trash can. Then she held the knife and spun it around. "I haven't put on makeup yet. My appearance is too sloppy. It's not good for favorability. What should I do?" Suddenly, the door opened. Wei Wei Bai, who was still spinning around a second ago, immediately changed her expression. She rubbed her eyes, and her beautiful almond-shaped eyes turned red. Her petal-like lips pursed, and a sorrowful expression appeared on her face. His hair was messy because he didn't take care of it. He was wearing pajamas and a shoe on one foot. He looked unkempt. Lu Zishi opened the door with the key the landlord had given him and saw his sister. She was holding a fruit knife and standing there with a sad expression on her face. He immediately thought that she was going to commit suicide. "Wei Wei, don't do anything stupid." He was so nervous that his muscles ached as he stared at the knife in her hand. Wei Wei Bai was at a loss for a moment. What kind of stupid thing was this? She looked at the knife in her hand. Cutting cucumbers. Lu Zishi held his breath. "Don't hurt yourself. I can handle the things on the internet. Don't listen to them." Wei Wei Bai was so weak and helpless. She had been attacked by so many words. How desperate would a person have to be to hide here and one commits suicide? But he left her behind and went abroad. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 87. Wei Wei Bai finally reacted. She looked at Lu Zishi in a daze, tears falling from her eyes. "Didn't you not want me anymore? Why did you come back?" Lu Zishi was so distressed that he didn't know what to say. "It's all Big Brother's fault. How can I not want you?" Wei Wei Bai got into character in a second. She looked at him, aggrieved and sorrowful. "They're all talking about me. They're saying that I sleep with other men." Lu Zishi slowly approached her, a bitter taste in his throat. "You don't. They're all bad people. Don't listen to them." Wei Wei Bai was dazed for a moment. They're not wrong. I'm nothing. How can I act? If everyone abandons me, what's the point of living? Lu Zishi suddenly stepped forward, snatched the knife from her hand, and threw it away. Then he pulled her into his arms and hugged her tightly. His eyes were wet. I want you, Wei Wei. Big brother wants you. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 90. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened. She foolishly looked up, her eyes full of clear tears. Big brother? She whispered. Lu Zishi felt like his heart was about to be crushed. I like you. Lu Zishi stared blankly, his mind blank. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Next time you open the bookshelf, you'll see it, if you like. Chapter 479. She was willing to like him, even if it was only a slight liking. It was enough to make him shed tears of gratitude. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 95. Wei Wei Bai buried her face in his warm chest. She finally couldn't hold on any longer, and her body began to tremble. Soft, broken sobs rang out softly. Lu Zishi knew that she had endured too much. Whether it was the pain of her childhood, the hurt he had caused her, or even the crazy condemnation of the netizens. It had all become a huge pressure, oppressing her to the point where she had nowhere to run. Lu Zishi gently and lovingly placed kisses on her hair. He constantly comforted her. Finally, Wei Wei Bai fell asleep in his arms, exhausted. His eyes were full of tenderness as he carried her to bed, wiped her tears, and covered her with a quilt. Then he sat by the bed in a daze and watched her all night. She had thick black hair, snow-white skin, cherry lips, and a delicate and cute nose. She was simply perfect. Lu Zishi smiled foolishly. It was great that she liked him. The system nibbled on its chocolate, thinking expressionlessly. A drama queen with exaggerated acting skills, and a stupid male lead with a hole in his head. What a good match. Bai Ziwen was in dire straits. She had clearly paid off her 10 million gambling debt and was planning to quit gambling. But for some reason, she was fooled by the people at the casino. She foolishly gambled again. Now, not only was the remaining 5 million gone, but she also owed several million in gambling debts. She had a miserable life. Then she thought of her cheap daughter. She searched and found that Wei Wei Bai had been miserably slandered on the internet. It was said that she had sold her body in exchange for a movie role, and that she had been humiliated by the film emperor. When Bai Ziwen saw this, an idea suddenly flashed through her mind. Right now, there was no specific news that Lu Zishi had recognized Wei Wei Bai as his sister. If she revealed on the internet that Wei Wei Bai was Lu Zishi's sister, then wouldn't Lu Zishi have no choice but to recognize her cheap daughter? Bai Ziwen was also forced into a corner. The gambling debt was too big. First, she would let Wei Wei Bai enter the Lu family, and then she would swindle Wei Wei Bai to pay off the debt. She immediately began to expose all the evidence. She had some intimate photos with Lu Rinjia, photos of her pregnancy, and Wei Wei Bai's birth certificate. There were also paternity tests and so on. As long as these were exposed, Wei Wei Bai's name. At that time, Lu Zishi, she would definitely be grateful to her mother. Bai Wei Wei cried too much. When she woke up, she felt that her eyes were swollen. She rubbed her eyes, Lu after getting off the bed. He went to the living room and saw a slender figure standing by the window. It was Lu Zishi. His back was to her, and he was giving orders on his phone. Suddenly, he turned around and saw Bai Wei Wei standing by the sofa with a confused look. He put away his phone and eagerly walked up to her. He picked her up by the waist and placed her on the sofa. The floor is cold. Don't step on it barefoot. Wei Wei Bai had just woken up. Her eyes were hazy. She lazily said, "In Big Brother." Lu Zishi saw that her eyes were misty, her lips were redder than usual, and her skin was as white as a delicate porcelain doll's. His heart was hit by a dull thud. This was called breathtaking. He followed his instincts and kissed the corner of her lips. Wei Wei Bai blankly allowed him to kiss her. He took advantage of the situation and kissed her ear. He gently sucked. When he saw that her ear was red from sensitivity, he couldn't help but chuckle. Address of the full text: https://www.sashu.com. Download address of the full text: https://www.sashu.com. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button below to record your reading record. Chapter 480. He suppressed his desire and said in a hoarse voice, "Wei Wei Bai, don't call me brother anymore." Wei Wei Bai blushed and looked at him in confusion. He couldn't help but say with a gentle expression, "I've already asked someone to clarify the rumors on the internet. Also, I plan to marry you." Wei Wei Bai said, "But we're brother and sister." Lu Zishi smiled. "I'll have someone edit all your past information. No one will know you're my sister, so you don't have to call me brother." Although it was cute for her to call him brother. Even more, he wanted her to call him hubby. Wei Wei Bai blinked. "Can I? Isn't that falsifying information?" Lu Zishi looked at her obedient appearance and suddenly felt a little sorry for her. Siblings in love. It was like walking on the tip of a knife, falling into hell at any moment. He actually started to feel sorry for her. She would encounter so many difficulties when she was with him. When he loved someone, he started to feel sorry for her future. But should he let her go? Lu Zishi's heart was crushed into pieces just thinking about it. "It's okay, leave it to me." Lu Zishi suppressed all his worries into his heart and revealed a gentle smile. Wei Wei Bai looked at him worriedly and finally sighed. "It's okay. I won't leave you." These words were a reassuring pill, and the darkness in Lu Zishi's heart was dispelled. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 96. Wei Wei Bai said, "It's good to have a sistercon brother. Flirt with him, and the favorability will increase." System said, "Brothers who have ideas about their own sisters are worse than beasts." Wei Wei Bai, System said, "Sisters who have ideas about their own brothers are brainless." Wei Wei Bai, System said, "That's why beasts are worse than beasts. If they're not retarded, who's retarded?" Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. System said, "Build a new style, talk about morality, resist obscenity." Wei Wei Bai, "I really want to block the system." Lu Zishi asked someone to tidy up the apartment. Then he led Wei Wei Bai back. Halfway through the journey, there was a traffic jam, and it started to drizzle. Lu Zishi frowned. "Can we take a detour?" This was the busiest road in the city, and the traffic jam would last at least half an hour. The driver said awkwardly, "Young master, the car is stuck in the middle and can't get out." Lu Zishi could only wait patiently. He turned to look at Wei Wei Bai and realized that she was leaning against the window. He followed her gaze. In the drizzle, there was a dessert shop not far away. This dessert shop was famous for its delicious desserts. Thinking that there would be a long traffic jam, Lu Zishi suddenly opened the car door and walked out in the rain. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. She turned around and saw that he was already far away. She quickly asked the driver for an umbrella and hurried over. Lu Zishi bought a few pieces of cherry cake and a milk drink. When he paid the bill, the clerk looked at him with a red face. Only then did he remember that his face was particularly troublesome. Before anyone reacted, he immediately walked out of the shop. In the distance, he saw a petite figure holding an umbrella, anxiously looking for someone in the rain. When she saw him, her eyes lit up, revealing a smile that curved her eyebrows. Wei Wei Bai trotted to his side, raised her hand high, and covered his head with the umbrella. Lu Zishi quickly lowered his head and took out a small cake from the bag. "I was afraid you were hungry, so I went to buy something to eat." Wei Wei Bai smiled, lowered her head, and took a bite of the cake. Then she raised her head, her eyebrows carrying traces of stunning charm. With cream on her lips, she sweetly said, "It's delicious." Slash. Chapter 481. Xiao Yi was shocked. This was too shameless. Lu Zishi smiled coldly. "Since you like me, don't even think about regretting it." Xiao Yi cursed. This was simply the logic of a bandit. Lu Zishi pressed the button and hung up. He coldly glanced at the phone, then turned around and saw Wei Wei Bai at the bedroom door. looking at him with a sheet draped over her. In the light, her snow-white skin and red lips carried traces of immaturity, but he could already see the stunning shadow of her future. Lu Zixi's breath caught as he thought of what he had just said. He didn't know how much she had heard. Wei Weibai laughed. "If I regret it, are you really going to die?" Lu Zixi stared at her with dark eyes. He stretched out his long legs and walked to her side. Then he extended his fingers and gently lifted her chin, carelessly rubbing her skin. As he wished, he saw her face turn red. He said in a low voice, I'm going to drag you down with me." "Wei Weibai." Lu Zixi chuckled. "You really believed it. How could I bear to let you die, fool?" Then, without waiting for her to reply, he lowered his head and kissed her. He didn't want to think about the future. What if she regretted it? Just thinking about it made his heart feel like it was being cut by a knife. This was the first time he hated the fact that they were siblings. Dreamlike Blossom's final scene. It was completed in the palace of the film city. Wei Weibai closed the script. It was super melodramatic. She didn't have the face to act. It was even more melodramatic than her. Xiaoyi picked up the loudspeaker and sat in the director's chair. "Everyone in position. Are the actors ready? Start shooting." Lu Zixi was going to act. He could finally sit in the director's chair. And Qian walked out in his costume. When he saw Wei Weibai in person, he breathed a sigh of relief. He finally didn't have to act in front of a green screen. Was there such a miserable supporting male lead? From beginning to end, he couldn't see the male and female leads. The scenes were all done by him talking to himself, and then editing. Wei Weibai walked out wearing a white shirt and a red dress. Her lively and beautiful appearance stunned everyone present. She turned her head and saw Lu Zixi in his full suit of general's armor. He was handsome, as if he had walked out of a painting. His eyes were incomparably cold. But when he saw Wei Weibai, his expression softened. Xiaoyi looked at this pair of golden boy and girl, brother and sister. He couldn't help but rub his face helplessly. The sour smell of love was too obvious. Couldn't he restrain himself a little? Xiaoyi raised the loudspeaker and roared, "Begin." Wei Weibai was the first to enter the zone. The smile in her eyes vanished. Her figure was like a willow leaf, sharp as a knife, as she threw herself into Lu Zixi's arms. "Brother." Her voice was resolute and desperate. "Please take me away." This plot was Yin Yi forcing her to abdicate, but Yin Qiqi had had enough of the life in the palace and all sorts of schemes and ambitions. All she wanted was to get out of the palace. She wanted to live in seclusion with her brother. But Yin Yi couldn't bear to part with his power. He hugged her, a look of struggle flashing through his eyes. In the end, he said, "When I ascend the throne, you will be my..." His tone was affectionate and gentle. But he didn't finish his words. Wei Weibai looked at him in despair. In the end, she just smiled. And Qian suddenly sneered. "Yin Yi, do you think you can succeed? The throne is Zhen's, and so is she. What right do you have to fight?" Lu Zixi's eyes turned cold as he glared fiercely at Qian. At this moment, the murderous look in the film emperor's eyes made Qian's pitiful self shrink back a little. Lu Zixi gritted his teeth and said word by word, "She is mine." To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 482. And Qian, is there such a line? I can't remember at the moment. Forget it. I'll continue acting. He sneered, "You've already fallen into my trap. Kill him for me." As soon as this line came out, a prepared arrow flew out. Wei Weibai's expression changed, and she pushed Lu Zixi away without hesitation. The arrow pierced her chest, breaking the blood bag and causing blood to gush out of her white blouse. Her face was deathly pale, and the sharp pain caused her to tremble as she collapsed. Blood stained her body. Lu Zixi rushed over and hugged her. He hardly needed to act. He just saw her like this. Even if it was a pretense, he was also afraid and grieved. Wei Weibai's eyes overflowed with deep affection and sorrow. "Brother," Lu Zixi looked at her in fear and gripped her hand tightly. His eyes were full of helplessness. "You'll be fine." Bai Weiwei sighed softly, with pity. It seemed real, but also seemed fake. Forget about me. I'm leaving. Lu Zixi heart seemed to be twisted. He stared blankly at Wei Wei Bai. She softly recited her lines. I'm willing to die for you, brother. Lu Zixi was almost shaken by the true emotion in her eyes. It was clearly a play, but there was no trace of acting. It was as if she was really willing to die for him. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 98. The final scene smoothly ended. Before the celebration party started, Lu Zixi received a call from his team. After he finished listening, his expression changed. Wei Wei Bai took off her costume and makeup. When she walked out, she saw Lu Zixi talking on the phone. His tone was somewhat angry. When she walked over, Lu Zixi turned his head warily and immediately hung up. What's wrong, brother? Lu Zixi revealed a reassuring smile. It's nothing. It's a company matter. Let's go. Wei Wei Bai took his hand and smiled. Okay. After returning home, they ate and took a shower. Then, they played Wei Wei Bai's favorite games together. At around 10 o'clock, Wei Wei Bai went to bed. Only then did Lu Zixi dare to turn on the computer. Sure enough, the internet had already exploded. Even the crew of Flower Blossom had been brushed aside. The top trending searches were all about him and by Wei Wei's sibling relationship. Originally, after a few days of rapid deletion, whitewashing, and changing the target, they were about to completely clear Wei Wei Bai's name. In the end, it turned out that he and Wei Wei Bai were biological siblings. Everything was exposed. The paternity test, the birth certificate, and the matter between his father and Bai Ziwen. All of them appeared on Weibo, Tieba, and forums. This could no longer be suppressed. Moreover, there was a complete set of dried goods, so there was no way to wash them. Lu Zixi almost wanted to smash his computer. This was not the most serious matter. He didn't dare to let Wei Wei Bai see this. It was their love affair that was exposed. One of them was the Weibo of a cute girl from a dessert shop. He posted several photos. It was a rainy day. He went to buy desserts, and they were filmed kissing in the rain. He was also careless. He had always thought that he could hide their relationship, so he didn't hide it. The angles of several photos were clear. The romantic rain, the light-colored umbrella. He smiled and gently lowered his head to kiss her. This photo was so beautiful that it exploded on Weibo. There was also a creepy title. The most disgusting thing of the year. Genius movie Emperor Lu Zixi actually committed incest with his biological sister. Usually, even a small matter in the entertainment industry could cause an uproar. Not to mention such an iconic incident. It was simply setting off earth-shattering waves. Chapter 483. Even his fans reacted strongly, with a lot of condemnation. Incest. This was the original sin. No one could wash away their innocence. Lu Zixi stretched out his hands and crossed his fingers. He tiredly rested his chin on the back of his hand. He definitely couldn't let her see this. Lu Zixi stared fiercely at the information that had been exposed. Who was it that exposed the fact that they were siblings? He called people to investigate, and the company was in chaos. Because the public relations department's phone had been blown up with calls. They were all denouncing Lu Zixi and Wei Wei Bai's love affair. The entertainment industry was like a double-edged sword. When he was famous, he was glamorous and surrounded by tens of thousands of people. When something happened, there was nowhere to run. It was like a carnival, and people couldn't wait to trample him into the ground. Lu Zixi wasn't afraid of being spurned. But what about Wei Wei Bai? She was only 18 years old, an age when she should be pampered. Moreover, her talent, Lu Zixi felt that she was the same as him, a talented actress. The kind of actress who would shine in the entertainment industry in the future. After this incident, her dreams were ruined. The fear in Lu Zixi's heart finally came true. Would she regret it? When their love was spurned by tens of thousands of people, would she still be able to insist on liking him? Lu Zixi turned off the computer, got in a bed, and reached out to hold her in his arms. Wei Wei Bai called out in a daze, "Brother?" Lu Zixi's voice trembled slightly. "I'm here. Go to sleep." Wei Wei Bai nodded blankly, then obediently nestled in his arms and fell asleep. Lu Zixi didn't sleep all night. He held her, not daring to let go. He was worried that when he woke up, she would leave him. Lu Zishi disconnected all the internet cables in the house. He lied to Wei Wei Bai, saying that there was a problem with the broadband in this area and that there was no way to go online. Then, the servants at home warned her. She wasn't allowed to go out, nor was she allowed to tell her what was going on outside. He could hide it for as long as he could. Lu Zishi received a call with the results of the investigation. His expression was calm, but his eyes were cold. He saw Wei Wei Bai lying on the sofa, reading a book. Wei Wei, I'm going out for a while. I'll be back soon. Wei Wei Bai was reading a novel happily. Her slender white legs stretched out from under her long shirt, and her feet swayed in the air. Yes, bring me desserts. Lu Zishi smiled dotingly. Okay. Xiao Yi hurried over. He was about to go crazy. After this incident, Fang Huaxian could only be temporarily suspended. Right now, Lu Zishi and Wei Wei Bai were all over the internet. Everyone condemned him. It was extremely crazy. Xiao Yi was worried that Lu Zishi would be beaten to death on the streets. Who asked him to be so famous? This time, he had committed incest with his own sister. It was like setting off a bomb. In particular, it was even scarier when some fans turned against them. They arrived at the agreed coffee shop. This place had long been booked and cleared out, so it was completely empty. Only Lu Zishi was sitting by the window drinking coffee. His movements were elegant, and his delicate features were ice-cold. Handsome and cold, it made people's hearts tremble. Xiao Yi sighed. There's no way to clean up this mess. You should pack up and take your sister abroad to avoid the limelight. Lu Zishi was expressionless, without a trace of panic. Let's settle our personal grudges first. Xiao Yi, what grudges? Just as he said this, the door to the coffee shop opened. Several bodyguards dragged Bai Ziwen in. Bai Ziwen's face was frightened. Her hair was disheveled, and she looked like a stray dog. When Lu Zishi saw her, his eyes flashed with disgust. Was it you who exposed that Wei Wei and I are biological siblings? After Bai Ziwen exposed it, she went to hide from gambling debts. For a moment, she didn't know that she had poked a hornet's nest. She thought that Lu Zishi was angry because she forced him to acknowledge Wei Wei Bai. She immediately pretended to be calm. Wei Wei is your biological sister. Even if you hate Annie, you can't deny this matter. Lu Zishi looked indifferently at the coffee in his hand. Bai Ziwen became agitated. Wei Wei is your sister. Now everyone knows. If you don't acknowledge it, you're heartless and unjust. Lu Zishi suddenly sneered, and his smile twisted. He gritted his teeth and said, So what if we're biological siblings? You're all rushing to force me. Bai Ziwen, you're biological to begin with. Lu Zishi suddenly got up and smashed the coffee cup in his hand on her head. Chapter 484. Bai Ziwen screamed as her head bled. Lu Zishi's eyes were filled with ruthlessness as he kicked her away. Bai Ziwen's face was covered in blood as she knocked over a table and chair. She looked at Lu Zishi in horror. Lu Zishi's face was filled with rage. He grabbed her hair and slammed her to the ground. Xiao, he was scared silly. He immediately stood up and stretched out his hand to grab his arm. Brother Lu, calm down. You're going to kill her. Lu Zishi was expressionless as he lifted his foot and stomped on Bai Ziwen's hand. Bai Ziwen screamed and rolled on the ground. Xiao, he felt his legs go soft. He always knew that Lu Zishi had a bad temper. The movie Emperor's elegant persona was for his fans to see, but he didn't expect him to be so savage. Lu Zishi's face was gloomy. He ignored Xiao Yi and leisurely used his shoe to crush Bai Ziwen's fingers. People said that the 10 fingers were connected to the heart. Stepping on them one by one was painful enough to make one's scalp numb. Xiao Yi was so scared that his voice trembled. You're still in the limelight. Don't cause any more trouble, Zishi. Lu Zishi said sinisterly. Let go. Xiao Yi's hand trembled. Under his cold and gloomy gaze, he obediently let go and then obediently shrank to the side. It wasn't that he didn't want to save her. It was that Uncle Lu's eyes were so frightening, so frightening. He was so scared that his little heart was about to split open. Lu Zishi absent-mindedly straightened his cuffs. Then he faced Bai Ziwen, who had been beaten to a pulp. He said maliciously, "Who are you calling my sisters?" Bai Ziwen's head spun as she looked at the terror-like Lu Zishi in horror. She said fearfully, "Wei Wei is—" Lu Zishi kicked her in the stomach. "Keep talking. Who are you calling my sister?" The ruthlessness in his heart was completely aroused. He wasn't afraid of being spurned. He wasn't afraid of losing his movie emperor status, nor was he afraid of losing fans. What he was afraid of was that Wei Wei Bai would leave him. This was something that was loathed and crazily condemned by the entire society. He couldn't imagine if she would regret being with this beast of a brother. She would regret it. If he didn't regret it for a day or a month, then what about a year or a decade? At that time, she would definitely leave him. This was the most fatal blow to Lu Zishi. Therefore, when he found out that Bai Ziwen was the one who exposed their relationship, both new and old grudges arose. Lu Zishi wished he could cut this woman into 1,000 pieces. Bai Ziwen was truly terrified. She hugged her head and cried, "Don't kill me. I only wanted Wei Wei to return to the Lu family." She felt that Lu Zishi should know that Wei Wei Bai wasn't his biological sister. That was why he had tortured and beaten her. Lu Zishi picked up a chair and was just about to smash it down. Bai Ziwen finally screamed out, "She's not your sister. I was wrong. I shouldn't have let her go. I shouldn't have lied to you." The chair stopped in midair. Bai Ziwen was so scared that she was in tears. "I had no choice. At that time, Wei Wei was dead. I was very afraid that your family would beat me to death, so I went to the orphanage to adopt one." Lu Zishi stared at her blankly. He couldn't seem to understand her words. Bai Ziwen lay on the ground in a sorry state. She didn't dare to raise her head as she begged for mercy. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have adopted a child and said that she was your biological sister. I shouldn't have forged a fake report. I just wanted to get a share of the property." She was frightened. Lu Zishi was like a demon. She was afraid that if she didn't admit it, she would be beaten to death. The chair in Lu Zishi's hand fell to the ground. The ferocious violence on his face disappeared and was replaced by disbelief. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 485. She wasn't his sister? He closed his eyes and endured the billowing waves in his heart, then expressionlessly combed his messy hair back. Then he crouched down and asked coldly, "You said Wei Wei isn't my sister?" Bai Ziwen cried, "Didn't you already know? Otherwise, why did you hit me like this?" He hit her because he thought Wei Wei Bai was his sister. Lu Zishi's fingers trembled, and he clenched them tightly. "Tell me clearly, you adopted Wei Wei from that orphanage." Just as Lu Zishi was interrogating Bai Ziwen, Wei Wei Bai suddenly heard the system's warning. Countdown to failure of the side quest. Please complete the mission of 100 favorability within 30 minutes. If you exceed 30 minutes, the host will run naked around the Earth's equator. This time, the warning was sharp and terrifying. This was Wei Wei Bai's first time facing failure of a side quest. She rolled off the sofa and onto the floor. How can the side quest fail? Bai Ziwen kept the secret very well. Even this fake daughter of hers didn't know that she wasn't her biological daughter. And because of Bai Ziwen's huge gambling debt, it was even more impossible for her to reveal this secret. This made Wei Wei Bai feel very relieved about the side quest. So she put all her energy into the main quest. The system said, "The male lead beat your mother up," and she confessed. Wei Wei Bai said, "Your mother is the one. Where's Lu Zishi? We need to do a big one. If the favorability doesn't reach 100 in half an hour," the system was excited. "Do you want to run naked around the equator?" Wei Wei Bai. Was Slagstem's tone gloating? It was. The system pulled up Lu Zishi's location. She immediately called a reporter and posted online. His location was exposed. The system looked at her familiar appearance. Sure enough, after doing so many bad things, she was nimble in doing things. Then Wei Wei Bai rushed desperately to the coffee shop. "Why did you call so many people over?" Wei Wei Bai. "The more people there are, the merrier. If he scolds us again, I will throw myself at him and say that I won't leave him even if I die. All right, I got 100 favorable impression points. Liu Zixi's favorability was still at 98. Wasn't it just a bit of insecurity that was causing trouble? The system said, "You're getting more and more familiar with the routine." Wei Wei Bai said, "If you had transmigrated 10 times, you would have turned from a newbie to a veteran. After that, I adopted her from that orphanage. What I said was the truth. I just wanted a share of the inheritance." Bai Ziwen's face was bruised and swollen. She cried miserably. How could she have imagined that Liu Zixi would be so terrifying? Not only did he not recognize her as his sister, he even beat her to death. Liu Zixi looked at her, his eyes cold. "Property? Do you know how much I hate you? I didn't kill you because I didn't want to dirty my hands, yet you still dare to appear in front of me." Bai Ziwen trembled all over, not daring to make a sound. "Liu Zixi, does Wei Wei know about this?" Bai Ziwen's mind was in a mess. She was afraid of being beaten to death by him, so she said whatever was on her mind. "I don't know. If she knew that she wasn't my biological child, she wouldn't be filial to me." Liu Zixi looked at her coldly, then suddenly sneered. "Adopting her was perhaps the most correct thing you've ever done. If it wasn't for Bai Ziwen's adoption, he probably would never have met Wei Wei Bai." All kinds of violent emotions were fluctuating in Liu Zixi's chest. But in the end, these emotions only had one impulse. He wanted to go back. He wanted to tell Wei Wei that they weren't biological siblings and that they could be together. Chapter 486. Xiao Yi, who was watching from the sidelines, was completely stunned. Even watching a melodramatic TV series couldn't compare to reality. Liu Zixi reached out, picked up the jacket on the back of the chair, and put it on. Then he said to the bodyguard, "Take her away. Throw her into the company's warehouse and lock her up. Wait until he thoroughly investigated the matter of Wei Wei in the orphanage. Only then could he release Bai Ziwen." In the end, she was someone who had raised Wei Wei, so Liu Zixi didn't have the heart to kill her. The bodyguard immediately dragged her away. Liu Zixi looked back at Xiao Yi. "You're in charge of guiding public opinion on the internet. Say that Bai Ziwen, this woman, is lying for money. The fact that Wei Wei and I aren't blood-related siblings has to be spread as soon as possible." At this point, Bai Ziwen couldn't possibly lie to him. After all, this lie wouldn't do her any good. Xiao Yi immediately nodded and was about to say something. Suddenly, the glass window was shattered by a stone. The stone hit Liu Zixi's feet, shattering the glass all over the floor. Xiao Yi cursed and raised his head to look. Outside the coffee shop, a large number of fans and reporters had run over. Some were heckling, some were cursing. It was bustling. Liu Zixi frowned. The bodyguards had already left. He took out his cell phone and made a call, asking the company to send a few more bodyguards. As a result, just as he finished the call, he saw a familiar petite figure in the crowd, struggling to approach the coffee shop. She wore a mask and had her hair tied up in a bun. Standing in the crowd, her face couldn't be seen, but she was conspicuous and cute. Liu Zixi's pupils constricted, and his heart jumped. He immediately recognized that this was Wei Wei Bai. The fans who came, as well as the reporters, were all potential violent elements. If they found out that she was Wei Wei Bai, then the situation would get out of hand, and she might be hurt. "Liu Zixi, are you really having incest with your sister?" The reporters shouted desperately. The door to the coffee shop was locked, so they could only push and shove desperately outside. This was the biggest news of the year. If anyone could interview Liu Zixi, even if it was just a photo, it was a good opportunity for the reporters to get a bonus. The fans weren't so rational. They screamed, "Liu Zixi, how can you be with your own sister? It's too disgusting. Get out of the entertainment industry. People like you should go to jail, and your sister isn't a good person either." Wei Wei Bai was about to go deaf. She glanced at the time. There were less than 5 minutes left. Was she really going to run around the world naked? That scene was so beautiful that she didn't dare to imagine it. Wei Wei Bai looked at the coffee shop's broken window. Liu Zixi stood by the window, his posture tall and straight like a pine tree. His delicate features were full of worry. He saw her. Wei Wei Bai was just about to say hello when her mask was pushed off by someone. Her pretty little face was exposed under the sunlight. Her watery eyes were sparkling, and her skin was soft and delicate. She carried a hint of ignorance. She was ridiculously beautiful. Such a person would be easily distinguished in a crowd of demons and devils. Lu Zixi's breathing stopped. His eyes were red, and fear made him unable to think. Xiaoyi was just about to say something, but Lu Zixi had already rushed to the door. Without hesitation, he pulled it open and rushed out. On the other side, some fans had already recognized Wei Wei Bai. Isn't that Wei Wei Bai? Is that the sister who committed incest with her own brother? How can she still have the face to come out? I thought she was just using the unspoken rules to climb up. I didn't expect her to be so disgusting. She hooked up with her own brother. Wei Wei Bai looked at them blankly. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 487. Several hands fiercely shoved her away. Someone madly said to her, "Why don't you go die? How can you seduce your brother? He's my idol." One person made a move. The remaining emotional fans began to panic. Wei Wei Bai's lips moved. She looked at them, petite and helpless. In the frenzied crowd, she was pitifully alone. An agitated fan picked up a shoe and viciously smashed it at Wei Wei Bai. A hand suddenly reached out from the crowd and hugged Wei Wei Bai, completely protecting her in its embrace. The shoe was also opened. Wei Wei Bai was hidden in a warm and broad embrace. She raised her head, only to see the panting Lu Zixi. His handsome face was filled with cold anger. Lu Zixi's arms tightly held Wei Wei Bai. The veins on the back of his hands were protruding, and his eyes held a desperate madness. Wei Wei Bai grabbed the clothes on his chest, her eyes somewhat flustered. She whispered, "I saw it. Our relationship was exposed on the internet." Lu Zixi's whole body stiffened. The joy in his heart from knowing that they weren't biological siblings had yet to fade. But another kind of longing emerged. Would she regret it? Everyone was cursing them. These malicious comments and the pressure of the entire society. Would she want to separate from him? The words, "not biological siblings," were in his mouth, but he couldn't say them out loud. Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath and was about to say something. Suddenly, she heard the system's warning. The male lead is in danger. There's a crazy fan on the left, stabbing with a knife. Stabbing from this direction. Stabbing the kidneys. Was this to prevent Lu Zixi from being impotent and incest? What a loyal fan who put in so much effort. Wei Wei Bai blinked and fiercely pushed Lu Zixi away with her fingers. Lu Zixi thought she didn't want him. He looked at her somewhat blankly and sadly. Did she really regret liking him? After Wei Wei Bai pushed him away, the knife happened to pierce her body. Because of the angle and because there were too many people. For a moment, Lu Zixi didn't see the knife. He only saw Wei Wei Bai's body suddenly fall. He didn't have time to be sad. He knocked aside a few people and reached out to grab her. Wei Wei Bai took the opportunity to hug him. She buried her head in his chest and suddenly said in a voice as tender as water, "Lu Zixi, I like you." Lu Zixi paused, his eyes somewhat moist. He had experienced so many malicious attacks. She was still willing to like him. He was so moved that he couldn't speak. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 99. There was only 1 minute left. Wei Wei Bai smiled and blushed shyly. "Can you kiss me?" In front of a crowd. In the crowd of people who were fiercely condemning them for being shameless and disgusting. Wei Wei Bai's voice was like clear spring water, flowing into his heart. Lu Zixi also smiled. He lowered his head and gently kissed her. At this moment, under the sun, they were so perfect that people couldn't help but hold their breath. No matter how difficult the road ahead was, they seemed to be fearless. "I love you." Lu Zixi left her lips. There wasn't a trace of gloom in his eyes, only warm affection. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 100. The side quest has been resolved within 30 minutes. Punishment has been canceled. The host is facing a major life threat and will leave the plane ahead of time. Countdown of 5 seconds. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were smiling, and her voice was weak. I love you too. Then she slowly closed her eyes and listened to the last second of the countdown. The familiar darkness enveloped her, and Lu Zishi finally realized that something was wrong. His hand was wet. He raised it, and it was covered in blood. Lu Zishi stared blankly at the blood in his hand. He lowered his head and saw Wei Wei Bai nestled in his arms. She was soft and calm, as if she was asleep. Address of the full text: https://www.sashu. Com download of the full text: https://www.sashu. Com read of the full text: https://m/sashu. com//. Chapter 488. Wei Wei Bai was short of breath. She struggled to say, "Tongzi, am I back?" The system said, "You are back, but you didn't succeed in running naked." Wei Wei Bai, what's with the pity in your tone? Do you want me to run naked? A familiar notification sounded. Host's mission is complete. 30 days of life gained, a total of 112 days. Wei Wei Bai was excited. She could live for a long time. Ding, deducting 5 days of life subsistence allowance, 15 days of a commoner's meal in the system cafeteria, 1 day of beauty capsule, 3 days of data fabrication device, 10 days of discounted system chocolate, 3 days of painkillers before death, 10 days of bullet screen maintenance fee. Wei Wei Bai, the system said, "Let me calculate with the calculator." Congratulations, host. After deducting 47 days, you have 65 days of life left. Wei Wei Bai felt like she was going to have a heart attack again. She worked so hard in this plane, but the result was not enough. Just the system alone was a wastrel. Eating a snack cost 25 days of her life. The system seemed to know what she was thinking. "You said I could eat." Wei Wei Bai's face was ferocious. "Where's the chocolate?" The system said flatteringly, "I saw the discount. Usually, a bucket of 100 life points, it's only 10 days of expiration." Bai Weiwei spat out a mouthful of old blood. The system was happy. "I ate as much as I could and finally finished it in this plane before the expiration date. I'm awesome, aren't I?" Weiwei Bai did not want to talk. She wanted to throw a bomb at the system. How much money did she have to earn to feed this trash system that only knew how to eat? Weiwei Bai's voice trembled. "Where's Yi Yuxuan? Where's my Yi Yuxuan?" The system said, "You're Yi Yuxuan?" Wei Wei Bai's eyes were filled with tears. "He's my life. My life depends on him. He's my tycoon, my golden thigh, my lifelong pursuit. I suddenly realized that I've fallen in love with him. Winning over anyone was better than winning over Yi Yuxuan." Every day, the host would refresh the threshold for being shameless. In the corridor of the hospital, by Chang Yin's side, "Mr. Yi, I think it's better to cancel this marriage. Our Bai family is trying to climb too high with you." Yi Yuxuan stood quietly by the wall with one hand in his pocket. He was wearing a clean white shirt and simple suit pants. He looked fresh and handsome. His expression was indifferent and his eyes were calm. When he looked at Bai Changyin, there was not a trace of emotion in his eyes. Bai Changyin revealed a tired expression. "My daughter's body isn't good either. I suddenly feel that she's not suitable to enter a wealthy family." Yi Yuxuan looked at Bai Changyin coldly. His entire body was icy cold. Bai Changyin tried his best to say, "How about I introduce a few girls who are better than my Wei Wei?" Yi Yuxuan glanced at him coldly and finally opened his mouth. "No one is better than her." Bai Changyin asked, "How do you know there isn't?" Yi Yuxuan lowered his head and his eyes flashed scarlet. "If I say there isn't, then there isn't. No one can compare to a single strand of her hair." The cold air was filled with ruthlessness. It was a little strange. Bai Changyin was stunned for a moment. Why did he feel that Yi Yuxuan's mood was not right? Qin Xiu, who had been observing from the side, also noticed that Yi Yuxuan's mood was a little out of control. He immediately came over and grabbed Yi Yuxuan's arm. He smiled and said, "In-law, let's talk about marriage later." Wei Wei hasn't woken up yet. It's most important to treat her first. As soon as this sentence came out, Bai Changyin felt sad. Yes, his daughter's life was still unknown. Titha. Chapter 489. What was he saying to Yi Yuxuan, this shameless beast? The most important thing was that his daughter woke up. Qin Xiu laughed as he pulled Yi Yuxuan away. When they finally reached his office, he frowned and said, "After sleeping, you're not in a good mood." Yi Yuxuan didn't say anything. He went to the table and opened the drawer. He took out a cigarette box and a lighter. Then he elegantly and neatly put the cigarette between his lips and lit it. Qin Xiu was surprised. "When did you start smoking?" Yi Yuxuan didn't smoke at all. She hadn't smoked since she was a child. Yi Yuxuan held the cigarette between her fingers and glanced at him lightly. "In my dream?" "Qin Xiu, in your dream?" Yi Yuxuan looked down at the cigarette and suddenly looked disappointed. "In my dream, she left me again." The movie and television tycoon's national sister follow-up, Lu Zixi incest scandal continued to ferment. From the film Emperor's incest with his sister, to Wei Wei Bai's death and the fact that they weren't siblings, it only took 3 days. Wei Wei Bai was an orphan and was adopted by Bai Ziwen, but she wasn't Lu Runjia's daughter. She had no blood relationship with Lu Zixi. In the article refuting the rumor, Wei Wei Bai's information in the orphanage was included. Bai Ziwen's fake paternity test was also published. There was also Wei Wei Bai and Lu Zixi's paternity test report, which also proved that they weren't biological siblings. The mighty public condemnation. Suddenly, silence fell. Bai Ziwen also held a press conference. At the press conference, she cried miserably. "My brain was covered in lard. Because of gambling debts, I wanted to blackmail the Lu family." All the reporters were in an uproar. Bai Ziwen, "I didn't expect that Lu Zixi wouldn't give me money at all, so I was angry and forged those things." In fact, they weren't siblings at all. There were fans at the press conference. These fans were immediately angry. They threw water bottles, umbrellas, and even chairs at Bai Ziwen. Bai Ziwen was sent to the hospital again. When Xiao Yi called Lu Zixi, Lu Zixi was silent for a long time before he said gloomily, "She's no longer of any value." Xiao Yi's entire body trembled. "Don't tell me, don't do anything stupid." Lu Zixi didn't say anything and directly hung up. Within a few days, Bai Ziwen died in the hospital due to an infected wound. She had died in a hurry, and no one had come to identify her body, so she had been taken to the funeral parlor to be cremated. After Xiao Yi found out, he felt that it was definitely Lu Zixi's doing. On the internet, the incest rumors were cleared up. News of Wei Wei Bai's death also spread. Because a fan couldn't stand the scandals of her idol's incest and felt deceived, she planned to assassinate Lu Zixi. However, Wei Wei Bai managed to block the attack. Wei Wei Bai died on the same day. A fan at the scene even posted a video of that day. In the crowd of crazy condemnation, when the knife came, Wei Wei Bai didn't hesitate to push Lu Zixi away. This scene shocked many people. How deep of a love did one have to be to not hesitate to use one's own life to save one's loved one? Many fans, as well as those who cursed Wei Wei Bai online, cried. All sorts of apologies were posted on Weibo. It was lively for quite a while. The name Bai Wei Wei, when she was alive, was only a small hit because of an advertisement and the unspoken rules of black material. But after her death, it became completely popular. We owe Wei Wei Bai a life. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 490. This sentence was spread all over the internet. Rumors killed people, killing the most innocent girl. And it was a girl who deeply loved their film emperor. There were even some extreme fans who said, "Love to this extent. Even if they were biological siblings, I can't afford to slander such a sister. To block a knife and die for the sake of loving someone. This kind of love was simply too pure to not be shaken." This Weibo post had a terrifying number of reposts. Gradually, someone began to call Wei Wei Bai little sister. It was like an apologetic memorial. Because they mistook her for Lu Zixi sister, they madly spat and cursed her. Later, the misunderstanding was cleared up, but she was long gone. The word little sister was like a memorial to an innocent girl. They were also apologizing for that innocent death. And what pushed this matter to a climax was Dreamlike Blossoms was released. This was Wei Wei Bai's debut work and also her last posthumous work. The Dreamlike Blossoms crew didn't excessively celebrate Wei Wei Bai's death. They simply wrote the three names Lu Zixi, Wei Wei Bai, and Qian on the poster. Wei Wei Bai was in the middle. Many people want to see the movie out of guilt. There were even people on Weibo who said, although I don't look forward to little sister Wei Wei's acting skills, I know that we all owe her this movie ticket. This Weibo post quickly became a hot search. Everyone liked it one after another. The movie started with a big scene. Lu Zixi was dressed in martial attire, looking valiant and formidable, looking back with cold eyes. And Qian was also remarkable. She played a scheming emperor with a thin, weak, and pale appearance. And when Wei Wei Bai appeared, it was a pair of hands, slender and pale fingers, pink and tender like peach blossoms. The hands gently pushed open the window full of sunlight. Then came a light shirt with wide sleeves, cute double hair buns, and a beautiful thin back. Someone called out, Chi-Chi. She turned her head lightly, her almond-shaped eyes crystal clear. Her fair and delicate skin was flawless under the sun. Suddenly, her lips curved slightly. His eyes were filled with sunshine, and his smile was as pure and beautiful as a child's. This smile was so cute that it melted everyone. Those who thought she didn't know how to act were shocked. The movie lasted for nearly 2 hours, and Wei Wei Bai's appearance lasted for about 30 minutes. However, everyone felt that she was the main character. She danced in her white and red dress. It was so stunning that everyone who was watching the movie gasped. In the movie, this girl had displayed acting skills that were beyond her age, and her stunning beauty could be passed down in film history. In the story, she had a crush on her brother. Her struggle, pain, and unwavering determination pushed the film to its climax. Especially when she died, it coincided with her real life. This scene made many people cry on the spot. When it was over, everyone couldn't calm down for a long time. The next day, a piece of news was pushed to the #1 trending topic. We didn't just kill an innocent sister. We killed a genius actress. Wei Wei Bai was completely and truly famous. It was not the red of a shooting star. It was the kind of red that would be passed down forever, and no one could forget her. The title of the nation's little sister. It also began to become popular. All this clamor on the internet made many people ignore it. Lu Zixi had disappeared for a long time. Xiao Yi also spent a lot of time before he finally found him. When he found his whereabouts, Xiao Yi was so scared that he drove through the night and desperately rushed to his location. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 491. The location was an old abandoned warehouse in the suburbs. He got out of the car and ran over, but the door to the warehouse suddenly opened. Lu Zixi was dressed in a black trench coat. His hair was messy, his beard was unkempt, and his eyes were bloodshot. Xiao Yi stopped in his tracks, suddenly not daring to go forward. Lu Zixi lazily raised his eyes, casually took out a cigarette, lit it, and took a drag. It was still that elegant, that beautiful posture. The red of the cigarette flickered in the night, but it made the bloodstains on his fingers even clearer. Xiao Yi shuddered as he took 2 steps forward. Only then did he clearly see that Lu Zixi's body was covered in blood. Xiao Yi's throat felt like it was blocked by a stone. It was very uncomfortable. You killed someone? Lu Zixi smiled, ruthless and cold. Not only did I kill her, but I also cut her to pieces. Xiao Yi's legs went soft, and he sat on the ground. He reached out and rubbed his face in frustration. You're crazy, Lu Zixi. Wei Wei Bai didn't let you live, so you could become a murderer. The person Lu Zixi killed. It was the female fan who killed Wei Wei Bai. That female fan was a loyal fan of Lu Zixi, the type that liked Lu Zixi. Before she assassinated Lu Zixi, She said on Weibo that her beloved idol had shattered her dreams. Later, after she killed Wei Bai, the fan ran away. Even the police were still looking for her. But they weren't as fast as Lu Zixi. After he found her, he killed her. When Lu Zixi heard the 3 words, Wei Bai, the hand holding the cigarette trembled violently. He stared blankly at the cigarette. The calm in his bloodshot eyes crumbled. Xiao Yi looked up and saw Lu Zixi's face full of tears. "She's dead," Lu Zixi said softly. As he spoke, he trembled as he smoked. But this action only made his tears fall more and more. "Do you know what I was thinking when she died?" Lu Zixi's eyes were full of tears as he chuckled. He said, one word at a time, "I couldn't wait for everyone to die. The fans who used to like him. The people who had made him the best actor. They all deserved to die. If it weren't for these people, public opinion wouldn't have been pushed up and no one would have come to kill him. Wei Bai would not have died." Xiao, he was also very uncomfortable. "Calm down." Lu Zixi turned his back and didn't speak. The cigarette burned his fingers, but he didn't feel anything. Xiao, he comforted him. "Wei wouldn't want you to be like this. Even if she dies, she'll still be a good child going to heaven. If you're like this, you won't be able to reunite with her even after you die." After saying that, Xiao Yi really wanted to slap himself. What kind of consolation was that? But these words finally shattered Lu Zixi's calm. His back started to tremble, and he finally started to sob. Xiao Yi sat in a daze, watching as Lu Zixi collapsed and crouched down. Then, she cried miserably for the entire night. Afterwards, Xiao Yi watched as Lu Zixi calmed down. He disposed of the body after the murder. Then, he expressionlessly said to Xiao Yi, "Don't let anyone know that you were here." Xiao Yi didn't know how to persuade him, so he could only sigh helplessly. The next time they met was when DreamWorks Like Dreams won an international award. Lu Zixi won Best Actor. Wei Bai won Best Actress. This wasn't a sympathy vote, but because their performances in DreamWorks Like Dreams were too wonderful. Lu Zixi, dressed in a black suit, gloomily walked towards the podium. He took the trophy. Then, he took the microphone and spoke to everyone. "First of all, I would like to thank No." Lu Zixi paused slightly, then coldly said, "I have no one to thank. Today, I came here to tell all the trash that if I could, I would kill you all." Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article. https://www.sashu.com download the full article. https://www.sashu.com download the mobile article. https://m/sashu.com//. Chapter 492. To me, each and every one of you, fans, audience, and people who love me, are all murderers. Lu Zixi's eyes were as cold as the abyss. He reached out and smashed the trophy in his hand onto the stage. The host wanted to come up. "Mr. Lu, this." Lu Zixi turned back, his eyes filled with hostility as he coldly looked at him. The host suddenly didn't dare to persuade him. Lu Zixi casually reached out and pulled at his collar. Because his fingers used too much force, he even tore off a few buttons. His face was pale, and his bangs fell over his forehead. His entire person stood on the stage, but he gave off a chilling and ruthless feeling. Lu Zixi continued to turn back and look at the dumbfounded audience. "From the day the person I loved most died, I also died. I once wanted to kill all of you, regardless of the consequences." He had even planned it out. A grand memorial service was held. Spent a huge amount of money to get thousands of his fans to attend. Then detonate the bomb and perish together with them. Why should his sister lie in a cold urn while these indirect murderers could still live well? But in the end, he dispelled the idea. He was afraid that after he died, his whole body would be covered in filthy blood. If Wei saw it, she might dislike him for being dirty and not want him. Lu Zixi coldly looked at everyone. Finally, he turned his gaze to the camera. Then he slowly revealed a cold smile. To those who like me, I'll say this. You really disgust me. With that, Lu Zixi face was cold as he stepped off the stage. Then he swaggered off. He drove straight to the police station. He called the chief. I want to turn myself in. The chief ran over with a group of policemen and saw Lu Zixi in a black suit. He was sitting in a chair with a cigarette between his fingers, his eyes empty and deep. Chief, Mr. Lu, this. Lu Zixi lazily turned his head and carelessly blew out a smoke ring. Through the hazy smoke, he said indifferently, I killed by Ziwen and that slut who killed Wei Wei. I kept the tools, the corpses, and the video evidence of my murders. These words stunned everyone. Someone would keep a video of their own murderer? Lu Zixi seemed to be talking about someone else. He was frighteningly calm. Intentional homicide and vile behavior. A death sentence should be enough. On the day of the execution, Xiao Yi came to visit with a tired expression. No matter how rich and powerful the Lu family was, they simply couldn't let Lu Zixi off the hook. Not to mention that Lu Zixi had made ample preparations just to get a death sentence. The lawyer had no other choice. Lu Zixi didn't leave himself any way out. Xiao Yi ran until his legs broke, all for the sake of a reprieve. In the end, Lu Zixi threatened them with a phone call, and none of the lawyers dared to take on the case. He was determined to die. No one could stop him. When the death sentence was handed down, Xiao Yi stared blankly at the verdict for the entire night, his mind completely blank. To him, the fact that Flower Blossom's box office had reached the top was more like a huge irony. Lu Zixi sat expressionlessly in his chair. He looked much more haggard, and his hair had lost its luster. His face became thinner, and his eyes became deeper and darker. His face was still handsome, but there was a cold, murderous aura. Seeing him like this, Xiao Yi couldn't help but rub his eyes. A grown man couldn't stop his tears. Lu Zixi, you're too hard on yourself. Step by step, he had personally pushed himself to the point of death. Even a madman couldn't be so cruel to himself. Lu Zixi's eyes barely changed. The moment the hospital announced Wei Wei Bai's death, he was completely dead. Sitting here today was nothing more than a walking corpse. Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article. https://www.sashu.com download the full article. https://www.sashu.com download the full article. https://m/sashu.com/. The next time you open the bookshelf, you'll see it. If you like. Chapter 493. Xiao Yi cried as he said, "You're going to be shot today. Do you have any last wishes?" Lu Zixi was silent for a moment, then said in a slightly hoarse voice, "I don't have any wishes. All my wishes are related to Wei Wei. If she died, he would have no wishes. It's just a pity." His gaze softened. "The first time I met her was in bed. At that time, we were drunk and confused." Xiao Yi cried as he said, "We're already sleeping together. What's there to regret?" Lu Zixi sighed. "I thought about it a few times later, but I couldn't remember what I felt like that night. Later, I didn't dare to really do her, because we were siblings." Xiao. Lu Zixi couldn't help but laugh. "Later, when she found out that we weren't siblings, she left me." Xiao. "So what's your regret?" Lu Zixi said indifferently. "It's a pity that I didn't really make love with her when I was sober." Xiao. This beast, he's about to die, but he still regrets this? Lu Zixi glanced at the time. "Okay, it's time." He stood up, and the prison guard came over to handcuff him and take him to the execution site. Xiao Yi sat there in a daze. After waiting for a long time, he heard the faint sound of a gunshot in the distance. His body trembled violently. He didn't know how long he was stiff, but Xiao Yi finally stood up. He still had to collect Lu Zixi's body. Lu Zishi said that his ashes would be mixed with Wei Wei Bai's, and that they would be inseparable even in death. It was a love that was crazy to death. Xiao Yi really wanted to curse out loud. Unfortunately, the man he scolded was no longer there. Qin Xiu listened to the entire dream. He pondered for a moment, then said, "Didn't you just take a nap for half an hour? You had such a long dream. You really have a rich imagination." Yi Yuxuan silently looked at the cigarette in his hand. His fingers were slender, and the way he held the cigarette was exceptionally beautiful. After waking up, "Do you know what I want to do?" Qin Xiu was confused. Yi Yuxuan said calmly, "I want to help the man in the dream realize his wish." Qin Xiu, "What wish?" Yi Yuxuan glanced at him faintly, then put the cigarette in the ashtray after only 2 puffs. "Sleep with her once." Qin Xiu was stunned. Yi Yuxuan had already turned around and walked out. Qin Xiu reacted, "Wait, that dream was made up by you. You just want to do that, Wei Wei Bai." With that said, Yi Yuxuan was nowhere to be seen. Qin Xiu was speechless for a moment and finally felt relieved. "You've grown up and can think about women." Wei Wei Bai wanted to get up, but she didn't have the strength. Prodigal Tong. Even if Yi Yuxuan was lying down, I wouldn't be able to climb into his bed. The system flipped around. "I still have a piece of chocolate left. It just expired. You can have it." Wei Wei Bai. "So you're saying that you're going to poison me to death, and then you don't need a strategy?" The system. "No, system, the chocolate is refreshing. It forcibly increases the body's activity. A piece of chocolate can keep you excited for at least 3 hours. Not to mention walking, even spinning and jumping would not be a problem." Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while before saying, "You eat so many chocolates that forcibly refresh and improve the body's condition because the system was nervous. Did she find out that it Wei Wei Bai? Is it because your kidneys are weak?" The system. Wei Wei Bai said earnestly, "Take it easy, don't damage your body." The system gritted its teeth. "I'm still a virgin." Wei Wei Bai. "That's true. You're such a poor and short system, I don't think anyone would like you." /save button below to record this reading. Chapter 494. His fingers gently lifted her towel and touched the smooth skin of her waist. Wei Wei Bai couldn't control herself and was tickled. She pushed Yi Yuxuan away and bit her lip. The corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up, and a muffled laugh sounded. Her black eyes were full of water vapor, with a rippling smile. Her lips were pursed, bright red and moist, which could hook a person's soul out. Yi Yuxuan paused. 97 days of life. Wei Wei Bai heard that her life points were increasing crazily, and looked at Yi Yuxuan with special interest. His white shirt was soaked in water, and he looked slender and thin, but the lines of his muscles were faintly discernible in his clothes. His skin was very white, but it wasn't the kind of unhealthy white. It was clean, like he was pampered. He lowered his head and stared at her with his beautiful black eyes. His thin lips were wet, and he looked particularly lustful. Wei Wei Bai didn't know why, but her heart beat a few beats faster. She was actually a little nervous. This wasn't a game, and it wasn't a calm and emotionless game. In reality, she didn't have any advantage. In fact, she couldn't even control her emotions. For the first time, Wei Wei Bai realized that if she wanted to conquer Yi Yuxuan, it wouldn't be as easy as it was in a plane, because her emotions would fluctuate. She would even be attracted to him, even if it was just because the other party's appearance was too perfect and her mood fluctuated naturally. It also made Wei Wei Bai feel strange and uncomfortable. Yi Yuxuan seemed to sense a retreat. He was like a vigilant beast and suddenly took a step forward. Wei Wei Bai instinctively took a step back. He took a step forward, silent and forbearing, but there was an aggressive light in his eyes. Soon, the two of them squeezed into a corner of the bathroom, body to body. Wei Wei Bai finally had time to speak. "Yi Yuxuan, what's wrong with you?" Yi Yuxuan looked at her deeply. His breathing was still chaotic. He lowered his voice and said hoarsely, "I want to fuck you." Wei Wei Bai was shocked. "Wait, what did she just hear?" The system was shocked as well. "Wait a minute, that should be the host line." Yi Yuxuan reached out and pulled up her wet hair, revealing her white and delicate neck. He lowered his head and kissed her neck. Noticing the trembling of her skin, he asked, "Can I?" Perhaps he was being manipulated by his own dreams. He had never been so impulsive before, and he had never experienced so many emotional fluctuations. But Yi Yuxuan felt that he was actually willing to be controlled. Maybe it wasn't his dream that was controlling him. It was the faint fragrance on her body and her soft body that was controlling him. HP favorability, 100 days. Wei Wei Bai, who was still hesitating, decided to go all out. 100 days of life was more than what she could get from conquering 3 planes. Just as she was about to nod, the warrior fired a shot. The system said, "Stop harvesting HP." Wei Wei Bai asked, "Why did it stop?" The system said, "Your current body can't accommodate more than 100 days of external HP. Wait until the next plane is successfully conquered. Then you can continue to expand your body." The HP given by the system was all gone. Wei Wei Bai's 100 days of life were all from Yi Yuxuan. Wei Wei Bai, why is it so hard to live? What did she do wrong? Yi Yuxuan's kiss was already slowly moving down. He was a little inexperienced, but he was seriously exploring this delicate field. Suddenly, a hand pressed against his lips. Yi Yuxuan looked up at her blankly. His eyes were a little wet, tempting her without her knowing. Wei Wei Bai's heart was hooked by his eyes. Her words of rejection were stuck in her mouth for a moment. Slash. Chapter 495. Qinxiu said, "You have to believe me, my Xiao Xin really likes Wei Wei." Bai Changyin said, "I like you. Can I sleep with you?" Qinxiu spat out a mouthful of blood. These words were too lethal, directly killing Qinxiu. Bai Changyin was determined. He opened the door of the ward and found that the caregivers were not there. Yi Yuxuan's back was facing him. Under the light, his slender white fingers were holding a small bra. He seemed to be hesitating on how to put it on her. Yi Yuxuan sensed someone coming in. His first reaction was to pull the blanket and wrap Wei Wei Bai like a dumpling. Then he turned around, holding the bra in his hand, his posture elegant and natural, his handsome face cold and noble. Bai Changyin, Qinxiu. Bai Changyin finally reacted. He staggered a few steps. Qinxiu immediately supported him. Bai Changyin was angry. "What did you do to her?" Yi Yuxuan looked at him coldly. He calmly replied, "What I do to my wife, I don't need to report to you." Old Father Bai was so angry that he passed away. Wei Wei Bai was dizzy. "Tongzi, your chocolate is poisonous." She was blocked by Yi Yuxuan in the bathroom. She started to feel dizzy. Her brain could not work at all. She was even seduced by Yi Yuxuan. How embarrassing. The system said, "Maybe it's expired. That's why you're drunk on chocolate. Don't eat these next time." Its body was strong, so it could withstand eating expired things. The host's body was weak. If she ate 2 more pieces of chocolate, she would probably die. It could not let her eat it next time. Wei Wei Bai rubbed the bridge of her nose. A respectful voice suddenly came from the side. "Your Majesty, what do you plan to do with this assassin?" "Your Majesty? Isn't this the title of the Emperor? Is she cross-dressing again?" Wei Wei Bai looked up and saw a woman wearing a round collar and wide sleeves bowing to her politely. Wei Wei Bai's mind went blank for a moment because of this masculine outfit. The system notification sounded. This mission is to obtain the love of Feng Yunyan. Target: Feng Yunyan. Progress: 0. Time: for months. When Wei Wei Bai heard the mission notification, she was distracted for a moment. There were already people around him talking about it. "This is a heinous crime. How dare you assassinate the sovereign king? You deserve to have your entire family wiped out. You have to tie them up and display them on the streets. Then, you have to dismember them to intimidate others." Every time there was a discussion, she heard it. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at -25. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at -30. -35. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but scold them in a low voice. "All of you, shut up." No one dared to make a sound. Bai Wei Wei's line of sight finally focused. First, she saw the antique furniture. There was a huge screen in front of her. It was nighttime, so there were lanterns everywhere. It was as bright as day. She looked down and saw a sorry figure lying in front of her. He was wearing a white robe, and his black hair fell to the ground. Just his back was stunning. It was as if he felt her gaze. The man lying on the ground finally looked up. White jade-like skin, black as ink eyes, and impeccably handsome features. His thin lips were tightly pursed, and his eyes were cold as he looked at Wei Wei Bai with hatred. Wei Wei Bai. It looks like he has a grudge against her. As expected, the system's voice sounded again. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -40. Wei Wei Bai. Host, please receive the original owner's memory. Wei Wei Bai frowned because of her headache. Feng Yunyan saw her uncomfortable appearance and thought it was because of the wound. He couldn't help but reveal a mocking smile. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. 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 Chapter 496. He thought that Wei Wei Bai would immediately order someone to drag him down and behead him. However, Wei Wei Bai's brows suddenly relaxed as she glanced at him indifferently. Her lips suddenly curled up, and her cold and elegant facial features were dazzling under the light. Then, he only heard her indifferent voice with a hint of sweetness as she said, "Put him in the heavenly prison and discuss it later." The female official stepped forward and immediately said, "Your Majesty, such a traitor must be beheaded on the spot to deter the thieves." Wei Wei Bai's cold eyes darkened as she released her aura. "Since when do I need you to question my words? Scram for me to receive your punishment." The female official immediately knelt down with a pale face. Because of the emperor's anger, everyone followed suit and knelt on the ground. Feng Yunyan lowered his head as a gloomy calculation flashed through his eyes. His thoughts were gloomy, and he was just about to say something. Suddenly, a jade finger, soft and with unquestionable strength, lifted his chin. His long eyelashes trembled as his fingers dug into the ground. His face was incomparably cold. However, he suddenly heard a voice with a hint of laughter. "It's just a small assassin. So, what if he's a remnant of the Feng family? He's still an ant under my feet." Feng Yunyan's expression turned cold as he glared fiercely at the woman sitting above him. However, he saw that her eyebrows were languid, her snow-white skin was lustrous, and her smile was cold and elegant. It made him dazed for a moment. Her indifferent voice sounded, "You're not bad-looking. Serve me." When Feng Yunyan heard this, his eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. His fingers dug into the ground until they bled. However, her fingertips slid across the skin of his jaw. It caused him to tremble. Without waiting for him to react, several attendants rushed over, tied up Feng Yunyan, and took him away. Wei Wei Bai saw that the person in question had left. She quickly waved her hand and had everyone retreat. When there was no one around, Wei Wei Bai helplessly reached out to support her forehead. "Do you think I'm not rich enough to die? This time, it's about revenge for the country and family. Feng Yunyan probably has the heart to eat me alive." This time, the world she transmigrated to was a bit strange. It was the female supremacy's world. The supremacy, as the name suggested, was inferior to men and women. The officials were all women, and the emperor was also a woman. Men had to stay at home and do housework. And Feng Yunyan was the prince of the previous dynasty. In this plane, she was called by Wei Wei, and her identity was a general of the previous dynasty. Speaking of the original owner, he was simply a super winner in life who was so cool and domineering that he had cheated all the way. At 15 years old, Wei Wei Bai. At the age of 17, he had become a guardian general of the Feng dynasty. Then, at the age of 20, he started a rebellion, killed everyone in the royal family, and successfully ascended the throne, changing the surname of the world to Bai. Feng Yunyan escaped the massacre, but he never forgot to take revenge. After planning for a long time, he finally managed to sneak in among the songsters tonight and succeed in the assassination. She transmigrated, so it could only be considered a half success. The system comforted her. This world is good. You can do whatever you want. Men are weak and helpless. You're as strong as an ox. Are you happy? Wei Bai, strong as an ox. The system continued to comfort her. It's just revenge for the country. You can even resolve the revenge of having your penis cut off. How can a small revenge trouble you? Wei Bai revealed a happy smile. Then she said, "Do you think I'll let you buy snacks if you flatter me?" The system. Wei Bai, if you dare to steal my life points in this world, you'll have a grudge with me for having your penis cut off. The system silently covered its crotch. Wei Bai, right? Where's my side reward? The punishment of almost running naked in the previous world left a deep impression on her. The system rummaged in the inventory. The reward is the world's best martial arts. Please accept. Wei Bai had never seen such a substantial reward. The world's best martial arts. Did it mean she could fly? Slash. Chapter 497. Feng Yunyan's eyes suddenly became affectionate. Your Majesty, if I become your man, what position will you give me? His face was like jade, and his long eyelashes covered half of the emotions in his eyes. When he pursed his thin lips, his seductive smile reached the tip of one's heart. Wei Bai, who was forcing herself to play the role of a domineering CEO. Why did she feel that this behavior of his was somewhat familiar? Feng Yunyan suddenly bit his lower lip lightly and frowned, causing one to feel pity for him. Your Majesty, you're hurting me. Wei Bai was disgusted by his sweet voice, and her fingers trembled. Feng Yunyan's eyes flashed coldly, like a poisonous snake harboring evil intentions. A black needle suddenly appeared on his finger, and he ruthlessly stabbed it into Wei Bai's hand. Wei Bai had the best martial arts in the world, if this was in the world of martial arts. She would definitely be an expert with a blower and a master of background music. She reacted very quickly, withdrawing her hand and rolling her body. She directly fell off the bed. With one leg still on the bed, Wei Bai, who was upside down, suddenly remembered that Feng Yunyan looked familiar just now. Wasn't this her way of pretending to be pitiful? She somewhat understood the system's feelings. It really burned her eyes. Feng Yunyan rolled up his hand and covered himself with a blanket. He quickly rushed to the side of the bed and attacked again with the needle in his hand. Wei Bai awkwardly rolled on the ground again. She dodged his fierce attack. Then she reached out and snatched the needle away. Ignoring the hatred in his eyes, she grabbed his blanket and threw him back on the bed. Like a hungry wolf, she pounced on him. The two of them immediately rolled into a ball. Feng Yunyan only felt that her body was flexible and strong, fiercely suppressing him. Both of their breaths were in a mess. Her face was flushed red, and her rapid breathing tickled his chin. Feng Yunyan's mind was full of calculations and cold, murderous intent. However, he was also momentarily distracted by her aura. Before he could calm down, his lips were sucked on by someone else. Feng Yunyan's entire body stiffened, and his scalp felt like it was going to explode. He had never been so close to another woman. However, Wei Bai had ruthlessly broken his cold boundary. She had violated him again and again. His lips trembled, and his eyes were dark as he stared at her. However, he saw that her eyes were full of smiles. Surprisingly, there wasn't a trace of lust in it. Instead, it was clear and gentle. Her kiss was incomparably gentle, with a feeling of cherishing. Feng Yunyan was in a bit of a daze. His ice-cold heart was filled with calculations, but for a moment, he couldn't operate them. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at -40. The smile in Wei Bai's eyes deepened. She let go of his lips without a trace of blame. All right, go to bed early. When you've thought it through and become my person, I'll tell you what position I'll give you. These words were spoken calmly and forcefully. This made Feng Yunyan feel ashamed and angry. He had actually been absent-minded just now. Wei Wei Bai let go of her hand. Suddenly, she frowned and her body softened. What's wrong with the system hitting me? You were too high and got a failure in acting cool. Your whole body is paralyzed. Your eyes are slanted. Your mouth is crooked. And your limbs are cramping. My condolences. Wei Wei Bai frowned. She laid on Feng Yunyan's body. Just as she was about to struggle, her body was pushed away. Feng Yunyan's expression was extremely calm. He pushed her away and slowly got up. His movements were neither fast nor slow. He pulled a robe from the side and put it on. Then he raised his smooth and delicate chin, revealing a cold sneer. I told you I'm poisonous, but you didn't believe me. Wei Wei Bai's body was paralyzed. She couldn't even speak. The system had already explained to her. Feng Yunyan's body is poisonous because of drug testing when he was young. If anyone touches it, they'll be paralyzed in mild cases and die in severe cases. Wei Wei Bai said, "Why didn't you say so earlier?" The system said, "When you're hungry, your brain doesn't work very well. You know." Wei Wei Bai, is there a more shameless system? Is there? The. Chapter 498. Feng Yunyan got off the bed. The room was empty. He pulled out the sword from the wall, his eyes dark. This room was built by the Feng family, but now it had become Wei Wei Bai's. The ridicule in Feng Yunyan's good-looking eyes grew stronger. He was like a cold reptile in the dark, finally showing its sharp teeth. He walked to the bed and looked at it with a murderous look. The woman on the bed had hair as black as the finest satin, shining with a luster. Her appearance was beautiful. Even in this situation, her eyes were still so clear and peaceful. Feng Yunyan wanted to see his enemy crying and begging for mercy. She was not as indifferent as she was now. Do you know what I was thinking when you killed the people from the imperial family? Wei Wei Bai was still arguing with the system. Think of a way. If I don't get the antidote, I'll be stabbed in the heart. I'm hungry. Are you a rice bucket? Why are you always hungry? I'm so hungry that I'm weak and helpless, so pitiful. Go to the cafeteria and get a meal. Just treat it as me dismissing a beggar. The system immediately came to life. Okay, you have to use 5 days of life to buy an antidote vaccine. After you buy it, you can fight against the poison in his body. Wei Wei Bai, bye. Suddenly, she felt that something was wrong. A hand grabbed her collar and lifted her up. Wei Wei Bai looked up and saw Feng Yunyan's cold, murderous look. Am I like an ant in your eyes? He held the sword and asked her a question. She looked at him with disdain and didn't say a word. What he wanted to see was his enemy weeping bitterly, not her indifferent and fearless appearance. Wei Wei Bai, warrior, you misunderstood. Feng Yunyan did not give her a chance to speak. He threw her onto the bed and placed his sword on her neck. His voice became gentle and demonic. Perhaps I should thank you. Back then, you killed all my family members to pave the way for me. Wei Wei Bai was at a loss. Paving the way? Feng Yunyan laughed softly. I hate those people from the Feng family even more than you do. Why are only women valued while men are abandoned like shoes? The laughter grew louder and louder, and in the end, it became somewhat deranged. On his handsome face, there was a smug and arrogant smile. It was so dazzling that people couldn't take their eyes off him. Who said that men can't be above others and can't be the ruler of this dynasty? After killing you, I will be the last legitimate successor of the Feng family. Wei Wei Bai, so ambitious. Feng Yunyan raised his eyebrows proudly. When the time comes, I will be the first man to succeed the throne. Wei Wei Bai started to consider. Would she be able to get 100 favorable impression points if she gave him the throne? Her neck hurt a little. The blade cut her skin. Feng Yunyan calmed down. So you can go and die. Wei Wei Bai had just eaten the vaccine and could move. She was about to break free. The door suddenly opened. Feng Yunyan turned around warily. But he saw a familiar figure. It was a trusted female official by Wei Wei Bai's side. Feng Yunyin relaxed. Have you finished the deployment? After killing Wei Wei Bai, immediately massacre Wei Wei Bai's loyal subordinates. The female official sneered and waved her hand. The people she brought immediately pulled out their swords. Yes, after you kill the emperor, you have no value. Feng Yunyin's face turned pale. He looked at them coldly. Are you betraying me? The female official was a spy hidden by Wei Wei Bai's side. She was also the most loyal official who supported Feng Yunyin's ascension. The female official laughed. You are really funny, Feng Yunyin. As a man, you actually want to ascend the throne? Dream on. Feng Yunyin staggered a few steps. He almost couldn't hold the sword in his hand. //. Chapter 499. His eyes became violent and sorrowful. So what if I'm a man? I'm the only one left in the Feng family. If I don't take the throne, who will? Otherwise, how could he believe the words of this female official? To carry out this thrilling assassination, he had to do it. The female official snorted, Your sister, Her Highness Princess Feng Ling, fake her death to avoid a disaster. She's the most legitimate successor. What are you? Feng Yunyin's voice finally trembled. Feng Ling? The female official said, You killed the traitor Wei Wei Bai. We will kill you and then welcome Princess Feng Ling back to ascend to the throne. Feng Yunyin's face was extremely pale. He looked at them coldly, and a feeling of despair surged from his heart. As a man, did he deserve to be abandoned? Did he deserve to be used? The female official said fiercely, Men, kill them. The female soldier wielding a knife immediately rushed over. Feng Yunyin saw a knife ruthlessly slashing towards his head. He no longer had the strength to struggle. He could only stand there and wait for death. Suddenly, a hand was placed on his waist. A huge force pulled him into a soft embrace. Shock flashed through Feng Yunyin's eyes. The sword in his hand was taken away. A white light flashed. The long sword blocked the knife that was about to kill Feng Yunyin. The sound of the sword clashing rang out. Feng Yunyin came back to his senses. He looked up and saw Wei Wei Bai with a faint smile. She didn't look like she was poisoned. Her voice was soft and slightly hoarse. What a good mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. When the female official saw that she was fine, her expression turned ugly. Your Majesty, you weren't poisoned? Wei Wei Bai was as calm as the wind. That depends on what kind of poison you look at. If it's the love poison, then I'm really beyond cure. These were teasing words. It made Feng Yunyin's ears turn red. At this time, she was still so indecent. Wei Wei Bai smiled at him. This smile dispersed the coldness, only full of charm. It was simply captivating. Feng Yunyin held his breath, and his heart skipped a beat. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at -35. Wei Wei Bai's smile deepened. She lifted his chin with a doting finger. Why didn't you say so earlier that you wanted my country? Feng Yunyin pursed his lips. His eyes were filled with vigilance. What was this woman trying to do? Why did she treat him like this? The next moment, his mind went blank. She lowered her head and kissed him deeply. The tip of her tongue licked the corner of his lips and bit him gently. His body began to tremble. His face turned even redder, and his eyes were filled with anger and helplessness. The female officer suddenly didn't care anymore. Everyone is under our control. Even if they aren't poisoned, we can still kill them. After saying that, she took the knife and quickly slashed at Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and kissed him without any change in her posture. Just as the knife was about to fall, the sword in her hand flashed with a white light and stabbed into the female official's body. The female official was dead. This sword was called 100% stabbing to death. Even if it was stabbed with the hilt, it was a unique skill that could kill people. The number one in the world was really lonely and seeking defeat. Shimin Chue Shue. Feng Yunyin didn't expect that Wei Wei Bai's martial arts would be so high. He looked at her in confusion. Wei Wei Bai left his lips and curled her lips. Don't be afraid, man. Jin will protect you. After saying that, she let go of him and jumped off the bed. Then, with a swish, 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 she chopped those traitors to death. This move, it was called cutting melons and vegetables. As the name suggested, when this move was put into effect, it was as if it was being executed. In Wei Wei Bai's eyes, everyone automatically turned into cabbages and melons. She cut cleanly, without any psychological burden. Corpses were everywhere, and blood flowed like a river. For the first time, Feng Yunyan was so shocked. She was actually this powerful. Wei Wei Bai threw the sword away as if nothing had happened. She was barefoot with her hair down. The sun had just risen. She suddenly turned around and said with a smile, "Feng Yunyan, Jin really likes you. Why don't you try to love Jin?" Feng Yunyan wasn't prepared at all and was hit by this sentence. His anger surged. "Wei Wei Bai, is it fun to play with me? If I love you, what will you give me in exchange?" How could a person change so quickly? She said she liked him? She just wanted to treat him like a clown. Wei Wei Bai turned to look out of the window. The morning light shone on her gorgeous face. It was so beautiful that it was illusory. Then, Feng Yunyan heard her say, "What will you give me in exchange? I'll take you as my husband. How about it?" Chapter 500. You can search time transmigration system. Male God, come to search book www.sashu.com to find the using the country as a betrothal gift. Feng Yunyan's deep and unshakable heart was cracked by these words. Ding! The male lead's affection is at -30. His fingers were tightly clenched into his palm as the pain made him come back to his senses. It was just a joke. Wei Wei Bai slowly walked in front of him. Her back was to the light, and her smile was incomparably gentle. "What? Are you so moved that you can't speak?" Feng Yunyan suppressed his anger. He had always suppressed his emotions, and to put it nicely, he was calm. To put it bluntly, he was gloomy. He lowered his eyes and dug his fingers into his palms. All the emotions on his handsome face disappeared. Suddenly, he revealed a faint smile, and the gentleness in his eyes became even more obvious. "Your Majesty is joking. How can the country be used as a betrothal gift? This Yunyan cannot accept this gift." Wei Wei Bai stared at him with burning eyes. She revealed a smile. Her facial features were already gorgeous to begin with. When she smiled, she was like a peony, beautiful as a cluster of flowers. When Feng Yunyan was in the palace, he had seen many women, but there was not a single one that could compare to Wei Wei Bai's elegance. His heart flashed with a trace of amazement, but he suppressed it. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said, "How about we make a bet?" Feng Yunyan had already completely calmed down. His voice was gentle. "What kind of bet does your Majesty want to make with an assassin like me?" Wei Wei Bai's voice was gentle and serious. "Let's bet on when I will fall in love with you." Feng Yunyan's thick eyelashes trembled, and his cold eyes once again rippled. "Didn't you not believe that I fell in love with you? Then I'll give you a chance. You can use any method to tempt me to fall in love with you." Her tone was filled with a trace of sweet temptation. It was clearly such a ridiculous suggestion, but she did not seem to be joking at all. Feng Yunyan finally looked up at her, but he saw a trace of burning innocence in her eyes as she looked at him expectantly. He didn't know why, but he couldn't help but look away. She didn't even need to address herself as this one. "He used me instead." This was an equal term. Before Feng Yunyan could say anything, the other party suddenly groaned. He immediately looked up and saw Wei Wei Bai frowning and clutching her shoulder. His sleeves were stained with blood. This was the wound he had inflicted. Wei Wei Bai secretly grimaced. She had been too pretentious just now, and her wound had actually reopened. She pulled on the system and cried, "Trash, it hurts." Tong Zhuang, who was engrossed in eating, said perfunctorily, "Well, it won't hurt as long as you bear with it. Why don't you ask your man to blow on it for you? I'm sure you'll be as happy as a fairy." "How will it hurt?" "Wei Wei Bai, good idea. She was just about to use her cool and domineering aura to make Feng Yunyin bow down to her charm and blow on her wound. However, a slender and fair hand had already tugged on her sleeve. Feng Yunyin lowered his head. His face was a little pale, and his cold and elegant face carried a trace of hesitation under the halo. I'm indebted to your majesty's kindness. I've committed such a great crime, and I dare not covet the country anymore. If your majesty still believes in me, I will definitely be loyal to you. Wei Wei Bai, oh, she looks like a fool. Loyalty, with a favorability of -30. She wants to die. She revealed a big smile and took the opportunity to grab his hand and touch it. Welcome, welcome. You're here to tease. Oh no, to be loyal to me. This flattering smile made Feng Yunyin purse his lips, and a trace of calculation flashed across his eyes. Wei Wei Bai, this tyrannical and cruel woman. What exactly was her motive? Feng Yunyin laughed in his heart, and those cold schemes appeared again. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here / transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Next time you open the bookshelf, you will see it, that you're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.